I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question to I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, there's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. You know that already. You've been listening to not that much common sense, but it's been a rip-roaring morning, has it not? I love that poem. Absolutely love that poem. Thank you very much indeed for getting that into us. Now, whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or you connected to us, always great to have your company. Great to hear from you as well. Don't forget, do get in touch on any of the big topics. And you know perfectly well the topic I'm going to want to talk to you about today. Yeah, topic we're talking about an awful lot yesterday as well, and that of course is the surrender of Brexit, because that is literally what happened yesterday. Keir Starmer has been accused of trying to drag Britain back into the EU under his reset deal with Brussels. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, by the Reform leader Nigel Farage, but also by some of his Labour backbench MPs as well. The PM insisted it would be a win-win for Britain and would deliver a £9 billion boost to the economy, but by when? And given that we're going to have to pay in, how much are we going to get back out of that? Or are we going to be at a loss as we were constantly in the EU? However, critics have slammed the deal, as I say, gives basically access to our coastal waters to European fishermen for not an extra year, not an extra 4 years, which was what apparently our negotiators wanted, but an extra 12 years. How does that happen unless you are completely and utterly befuddled at the moment of negotiation? Because you've set up a big summit for Monday morning and you have to have something to show for it. So you end up having to bend over that barrel and take whatever you're given, because that's exactly what happened on that issue. Plus, no final agreement on a youth mobility scheme, but they're going to call it a youth experience scheme. And so we won't realise there are 1 million extra young people from Europe coming here. And why would they want to come here as opposed to us go there, given that 50% unemployment in many southern European countries? I mean, why on earth would they come here? Plus, of course, we're looking at facing higher energy bills. Yeah, that's even possible as well under the surrender deal, as the agreement limits the UK's ability to change our net zero rules, because we're going to sign up to the EU carbon emissions market. And by the way, will be punished if we leave any of that. Oh yeah, and a small matter of having to sign up to all the rules on animal and agricultural produce as well. Oh yeah, and we'll be punished if we leave that agreement. So it actually ties our hands for future, even after Keir Starmer loses the next election, which, let's face it, an awful lot are hoping he does. It's an extraordinary deal. How anyone thought this was good for Britain, I do not know. But we know why these people, Keir Starmer and his mates, thought it was good for Britain, is because it's basically taking us back into the EU. Now, Keir Starmer is counting on the idea that we're all had enough of those Brexit battles. We're kind of over it. We don't really want to keep those battles going. But the thing is, it wasn't us keeping the battles going. We were under the illusion in 2016, when we got that referendum to leave or remain, that was the end of the matter. It was Keir Starmer and his mates in Labour and the Lib Dems and others, and many of the Tories too, who decided to keep that battle going. He spent 3 years as Shadow Brexit Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn, trying to stop Brexit from happening in the first place, trying to get a second referendum. He played along after 2019, he played along ahead of 2016, that he would actually respect the biggest national democratic vote for anything in our country's history, but he didn't really mean it then, and he doesn't mean it now. So even when in his last manifesto he said we will not return to freedom of movement, we will not return to EU control over us, he's actually literally did that yesterday. The European Court of Justice is going to have a say over our agricultural and animal welfare laws. They're going to have a say over us, even though we are not signed up to any of this at all. The basic issue is Keir Starmer thinks we're stupid. He particularly thinks that Brexit voters are stupid, because we were all fooled by what was written on the side of a big red bus back in 2016, weren't we? We don't know any better. He thinks we're all going to be fooled by, oh, we're not going to have to queue so long, so we're going to be able to use the e-gates when we're handing our passports over at European destinations in the future. Even that, by the way, is not a sure thing. And by the way, nothing about Brexit required any EU country to stop us from using their e-gates. He thinks we're dumb. He thinks we're going to be fooled by all of this, but we're not. There's a message for you, Keir Starmer. The British people aren't stupid. Well, yeah, OK. They did elect you last July. Bit of a mistake, eh? But we all know from that vote, it wasn't a vote for you. It was a vote against the Tories of 14 years. And now you think that you can, with a massive majority, get away with trying to hoodwink us back into getting back into the EU by stealth. It is not going to work. The British public have seen through you. Look at your latest poll ratings, YouGov rating, putting you way, way down at the bottom of the list. I mean, below, was it 46, minus 46 rating. The British public have seen through you. They're not dumb, they're not stupid, and they will not allow this to go ahead. At the end of the day, the British people will not allow this. You are going to be punished for this at the ballot box, Keir Starmer, mark my words. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about Gary Lineker. He's out of the BBC, last show this weekend, but he has been forced to go without a payoff. £800,000 he lost out on. I'm sure he'll manage. So, and don't forget, in just 20 minutes' time or so, we're going to get the result of the judgment of the Lucy Connolly appeal against her 31-month sentence for a, well, very nasty online rant on the day of the Southport attack. But 31 months behind bars for someone with no criminal record whatsoever, no threat to the public, I think we all agree is way beyond the pale. So we'll bring that to you as soon as we get it. So all of that coming up. I want to hear from you on any of the topics we're talking about, but in particular about Keir Starmer basically surrendering Britain to the EU under his Brexit reset deal. I want to know, what is your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Delighted to say, waiting very patiently, I'm yapping on. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, joins us. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia. How's it going?
What did you make of it when you saw this, the text of the deal?
Depressingly predictable. I mean, we all knew that Keir Starmer missed a second referendum, was always going to be looking to reverse Brexit, to scupper it. I think what we're seeing now is the plan is to slowly unravel it, to almost salami slice it, to piece by piece go back towards single market rules, perhaps even customs unions rules. It's something which is so clearly the direction of travel now. So this capitulation on agri-food, on food and agricultural products, means we're basically just going to be following single market rules in that area. That's going to open the question about why don't we do it in this area and that area and this other sector and so on. There's obviously the shameful capitulation over fishing, which granted is a kind of extension of the deal that existed previously under Boris Johnson's government, but for 12 years no one saw that number coming.
I mean, no one even mentioned that number. No other country has that sort of. Other countries have a 1-year rollover.
Exactly, that's the deal with Norway, that's the deal with many other coastal countries. Apparently for us it's fundamentally different. And you think, what are we getting out of this? I mean, the most kind of relatively credible estimates is that maybe this will put 0.3% on GDP, even then that could be wiped out.
Well done, everybody.
By a few bad weather events. E-gates is all that they've been talking about, as if making sure that middle-class people from North London going on skiing holidays, no offence, might be able to get through passport control slightly quicker is a much, as if, like, I just...
But it doesn't guarantee that. No EU country has been required to make us go through separate e-gates at all. I've tried some countries like Portugal allows, and nothing in this actually changes anything.
No, exactly. This deal does not mandate that that's going to happen. The Commission has not said it's complete.
This is totally the obsession. You know those people who go on those marches for the EU, and they're ones who sort of flag us off for being sort of flag. I'm going to go flag huggers. So I'm going to say the other flag.
It's too early for the
flag
other
huggers, flug huggers. But then they're happily waving that blue flag with the yellow stars. That's not even their flag, and they'll wave that. They'll fly Palestinian flags, EU flags. The one thing they won't fly is their own flag because that would make them a bigger. But those people, they are genuinely obsessed with having to stand for more than a nanosecond in a passport queue.
And I think those who would trade their freedom for a slightly quicker path through passport control probably deserve neither. It's embarrassing, and they're not even getting that in this deal. That's
exactly.
The thing.
I know, but it is unbelievably tragic. And if you go through all the details, even the fact that things like they kind of pushed along the way the youth mobility scheme, but they're going to call it a youth experience scheme because we won't realise it's people coming to the country. So there are 80 million young people under 30 in the EU. I think there's probably a lot more, about that 18 to 30 group who'd be allowed to come. How many of those do you think, for instance, living in countries like Spain and Italy, where you've got pretty much 50% unemployment, do you think will want to come to Britain if there are jobs? I wonder. I mean, the reality is, I don't think there are many Brits sitting in, Stoke-on-Trent at the age of 25 go, you know what, I think I'm going to go and work in Bulgaria. I reckon that's where my future lies. Of course not. It's just madness. So of course, there's always going to be a benefit for the younger people from the EU because of the language skills. And it's not because we're stupid, because we can't do other languages. You don't need to speak other European languages in the same way young people across Europe do need to speak English to get ahead in so many different industries. English is now the international language. Esperanto wasn't needed. We've got English. Every film they watch, every TV series, every song they listen to is in English. That's why they speak good English. So they've got a benefit of coming here, which we're not going to get. But also, apparently, one of the sticking points was the EU wanted people to be able to bring their families with them. So a youth mobility scheme, young people making their, getting ahead and staying for a short period of time, bringing their families. Given that we've already got, was it 1.5 million people in this country living here illegally who've overstayed their legal arrival in this country on a tourist work or student visa, what could possibly go wrong?
And it was amazing how quickly they capitulated to that as well. Because as you say, this deal is primarily important for the European Union side because for all the reasons that you've talked about, it's much higher youth unemployment in many parts of Europe, so there's a desire to move around to find work and find experiences and so on. Also, the language question. This is not something that you're going to see equal numbers going in either direction. Ladling on top of that, the other even bigger demands that were being made about bringing people with them and so on and so forth. It was almost like they were just taking the mick with this. Like they knew that Keir Starmer
see what we
was
can get by him.
Sat on their side of the negotiating table, and that's what we've ended up with, a deal that only really makes sense if you think the point of it is to provide us brilliant a PR win for the European Union as was possible.
Oh, I mean, they were so gleefully sending out messages about this. They were very much happy. But again, I was saying on the show yesterday, normally in negotiations, you have two different sides. They might want the same end game in terms of let's get a trade deal or let's come to a new arrangement. But they want different things, different priorities. Otherwise, it would have happened already. That's kind of the giveaway. Otherwise, it would have just happened. But in this case, you literally had Keir Starmer and the EU on the same side. And it was so blatant. It was so blatant. I mean, the carbon trading scheme is an absolute disaster. Basically, this is that carbon emissions. And again, this is just, I mean, it's just a nonsense. It's an accounting nonsense to make it look like you're green, basically. But it would mean that you'd be penalised if you breach things. So we if we drop net zero, we'd be penalised for that, financially penalised by the EU. The defence fund, we're going to get access to that defence fund. We're not quite sure. This is a 150 billion euro defence fund. Well, a fund put together by the EU to basically purchase more arms for for the EU, so we can actually start defending ourselves and doing the job which apparently we expect the taxpayers of Arizona to pay for the last 40 years. But again, we're not. I think it's going to be limited. Is it 20% of that fund or something we're going to have access to, or something like that. The food laws. The fishing rights, I mean, the fishing rights is the one that's most blatant. Now, again, I think the government is working on the basis that, same with farmers. Most of us aren't farmers. Most of us don't work with farmers, don't know any farmers. Fishers. I mean, how many people do you know who work in the fishing industry? Probably pretty much no one. I know Lance Foreman. I'm friends with Lance Foreman, who wonderful salmon, wonderful smoked salmon. Now, look, the reality is they think that because we're not directly affected by it, we don't understand issues of national sovereignty. We're an island nation. We have a load of water around us, which is ours. We've allowed the EU to fish in it for years. They've overfished it. The French and Spanish fishermen have basically, had huge amount more of our fishing stocks. Our industry has been completely destroyed by that. The plan was we would gradually, over a period of years, take more and more control of it back. Absolutely gone now. Absolutely gone. This is going to destroy, and it's not just fishing industry. This is coastal communities.
Absolutely, and I think it's one of those things where it's taken on tremendously symbolic importance, because I think it really shows people what we've given up, both by dint of our membership of the European Union and also by the settlement that has followed it. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about, well, it's a very small part of the economy. I mean, it would be true, but that's also because it's been decimated over decades by the EU's common fisheries policy, and now the kind of slightly more watered down version of that arrangement that we've ended up with after Brexit. And you're completely right, those coastal communities, very similar to the Red Wall, as far as you've got places where the economic heartbeat of it was just kind of taken away from them, whether that was the pit closures for places in the north and the Midlands, or it's the fisheries issue for places around the coast. And this is something that's going to be a genuine electoral issue in those places, and it's absurd to pretend that just because you look at it in a spreadsheet and it's relatively marginal, that it won't have important symbolic significance in those particular places.
But also that idea, and the same with the farmers, same with maybe the older people and their winter fuel allowance. They don't vote for us anyway, I think, is the Labour calculation. But I think a lot of Red Wall MPs who live now Labour are just saying, we might need some of those votes in the future. I'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. Obviously, an awful lot of calls coming in. We'll get to as many as we can today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say. Let's talk a bit about Gary Lineker. He's left the BBC. I think we're all delighted. I love the fact that he did this video apologising. Basically, he would never have tweeted the anti-Semitic rat emoji on this video he put out if he'd realised. It's like, well, except it's not the first time, mate. There's been basically a little clear route down the rabbit hole of the anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist movement. Not being anti-Israel's existence necessarily makes you anti-Semitic, but the people he retweets, a lot of the commentary, absolutely is. I've got to say, I didn't want him to leave the BBC. I wanted him to stay on the BBC and to stop saying and indeed thinking stupid, uninformed things. The trouble is, I think he's just been watching BBC News. Genuinely, I mean, the BBC analysis statement, again, of things like, the UK, France and Canada, it warned Israel over intolerable Gaza suffering. So all of those countries have been involved in wars in recent years. They've helped out, Iran, Afghanistan, or helping to defeat Al-Qaeda or ISIS. When, of course, no innocent civilians died at all. No children were ever killed while we defeated those terrorists. I mean, they are deluded. We've got war reporters right now on the scene in the Middle East who apparently have never known children die in wars, especially when they're used as human shields by a terrorist organisation. This has come as a complete shock to them.
No, absolutely. On the one hand, there's this refusal to admit what is tragically, depressingly typical of warfare, is that human beings, civilians, get caught in the crossfire. That's true of basically every conflict.
This is why war's a bad thing. You should try and avoid it.
Absolutely, and why Hamas shouldn't have started this one in the first place. They also miss what is quite unique about this particular conflict, which is that you have in Hamas a terroristic, tyrannical group reigning over Gaza who not only will willfully put human beings, their own civilians, in harm's way, but actually kind of wants them to be killed. It's a propaganda win for them. They can pump out the images.
Some of the leaders
like
have
Lineker
stated this in public.
Absolutely. They've said that this is, and you know, essentially because of their warped Islamist ideology, they think, well, those people will be in heaven. They're martyrs for the cause, and plus it will help turn global opinion out.
I mean, Putin doesn't care about, you know, the men that he's sending into the meat grinder, as Donald Trump calls it, in Ukraine. He doesn't care about them. But it's not the same as Hamas, who actively put women and children and innocent other civilians into harm's way deliberately in the hope that they get killed by an Israeli bomb.
No, absolutely. And this is something which you don't even have to read between the lines. You just look at what various of their leaders have said over the years. And there's this refusal to recognise any of this. And also, on the part of people like Gary Lineker, to be frank, a dim-witted, credulous willingness to see any old nonsense which is being pumped out from Gaza, which is, you know, as I say, ruled by an iron fist by Hamas. There's nothing that gets out of that place that doesn't go through them. And just
never acknowledged, by the way, BBC, ITV, Sky and everything, when they use footage from Gaza, they've got this footage and they've got an interview, you know, the doctor saying how awful it is, and here are more bodies laid out, and yeah, it's all awful. But we also know there have been plenty of videos where it's all been staged, because we've actually got the offcuts, you know, where they've actually got, right, everyone lie down, right, everyone, okay, right, action, everyone starts screaming and running. I mean, they literally, it's like you know, what Pallywood they call it now, it's Palestinian, you know, Hollywood. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is completely happening. Children are being killed, innocent people are being killed, but they're being put in harm's way deliberately. But also the key thing is, again, this statistic is incontrovertible, is that when you actually look at on Hamas's own figures, the number of civilian deaths to combatant deaths is virtually 1-to-1. That has never been achieved. Now, you think, well, that's awful, or a child dying for every soldier that dies. No. When we go to war in Britain, when America, when any other Western state has gone to war, even in recent years against terrorists, you're talking about 10, 20, even 50 civilian deaths for each combatant death. This has never been achieved before. This shows how careful Israel is being. Doesn't mean that there aren't mistakes, doesn't mean that there aren't some bad actors in the IDF. Of course there are, as there have been in our own military. But the idea that this is some uniquely awful war, and that what is happening, the intolerable, the UK, French, Canadian leaders, this intolerable suffering in Gaza, well, it apparently isn't intolerable in Sudan. It isn't intolerable in many other parts of the world where this is ongoing. I mean, there is nothing unique about this other than the Western attitude.
Now, I think the media, the BBC in particular, the pundit class and the talking heads, they've convinced themselves that there's only one war going on in the world at the moment, and that also that this is aberrant, this is insane. They seem to think that one day Israel just kind of woke up, you know, on the wrong side of bed and decided to just plough in, completely forgetting the genocidal terror attack on an insane scale, like no country has experienced something like that before, which precipitated it. And there's just this you start talking about, well, Hamas are a problem, they need to be dealt with, and people just mumble and stare into the distance. There's just a complete refusal to recognise what the proper story is here. And you can't help but feel around the edges that it's motivated by a tendency to see the Jewish state as uniquely maligned because of the people who happen to populate it. So this is incontrovertible, I think.
Now, again, if your biggest problem with any country or any leader in the Middle East is Israel, you're an anti-Semite. I don't think it's possible to not be, because if your biggest problem isn't Saudi Arabia or Syria under whichever leadership, or Iran or Iraq or any, you know, Jordan, any other countries, if your biggest problem is the only democratic state in that part of the world, you're anti-Semitic. You just don't like Jews. But be honest about it. I'd rather know it if people think about it, but I'd rather not know it if it's a guy who's supposed to just be introducing, you know, World Cup coverage on the BBC. Bye-bye, good riddance, I'd say, to Gary. And my best advice to Gary Lineker is don't zip it. You know, feel free to say anything you want now you don't work for the BBC and I don't pay your wages anymore. But as a general rule, maybe don't get your news and your information from TikTok, yeah? Maybe get it from, I would say, reputable news organisations, so not the BBC. Just finally, I know we want to go to messages, but I want to talk about Ukraine very briefly. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin had a lengthy phone call. What do they do for these hours? Because I can't believe that Donald Trump does the detail. A couple of hours, wasn't it? We understand, it's probably positive, but J.D. Vance and others will say, look, but, you know, America will walk away from peace talks. And the implication also walking away from Ukraine if Russia won't come to a deal, but there's offer possibly of trade with Russia to get them to come for a deal. Reality is, if the threat is that US will walk away from Ukraine, Russia's just going to sit on their hands. Putin's just sitting there laughing, isn't he?
No, I think that was definitely concerning, those comments there from Vance, implying that you would almost reward Russia for refusing to play ball with these negotiations. We've talked for a temporary ceasefire. I do hope that in parallel, one thing you're starting to see shift a little bit is the rhetoric coming out of in particular Donald Trump. A kind of dawning realisation that Putin is taking the mick, to put it lightly, that he's the one thing Donald Trump doesn't want to look like is a sucker, and I think there's chance that
he is very
how
much looking like a sucker.
Things are looking now, so one can only hope that will bear out. Trump is nothing if not willing to surprise us in terms of how he operates.
Sixpence, yeah.
So we can only hope, but this is going to be a long process. That this kind of fumbling towards some kind of negotiation. We did see those teams meet in Istanbul, even if it was with Putin's absence. This is certainly the starting point for something that might form, but who knows if it's all just going to be blown up in the next couple of days.
Quite literally, even, indeed. Thank you very much. More from Tom Slater, lots more coming up from you as well. Don't forget, in about 5 minutes' time, we're going to get that result of that appeal to Lucy Connolly. It's going to be a written judgment from the court. I don't know why they felt they couldn't have given it last week, but there we are. We'll get a reaction to that. We're going to get your calls about the EU and Brexit betrayal. Let's face it, that's what it is. On air, up next. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, just awaiting that verdict in the Lucy Connolly case, her appeal against her 31-month sentence after that very nasty tweet, undoubtedly, after the Southport attack. Let's get your calls there about Brexit betrayal from Keir Starmer. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. John is in Bradford and he wants to have his say. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well indeed. Apart from the Brexit betrayal, what do you make of it?
Well, I reckon that there should be a British petition to the King to dissolve this government.
It's an elected government. It's democratically elected. Don't fall into their anti-democratic trap.
No, but I mean, the thing is, if enough people backed it, the king would be very silly not to listen to them. But anyway, that's not what I rang about.
Yeah.
Now they're on about these e-gates.
Yeah.
Now I went to Sicily 3 weeks ago, right? I went into Catania Airport.
Lovely.
And to get through immigration took me 12 minutes. The e-gates, they were queuing round the corner because it kept breaking down. So,
I mean, it is Sicily.
12, yeah, and that's 12 minutes it took me to get through.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not an issue. It's completely different in different airports, in different countries. It's got nothing to do with it. There's nothing about Brexit that required any country to insist on that at all. What do you make of the whole deal, basically, of from what has actually been announced and whether it's going to be a benefit to us?
It's not going to be a benefit to us. It's going to be a traitor. It's going to damage any further trade negotiation. And you mark my words, Donald Trump's going to come back and say, right, the deal's cancelled.
Well, in fact, we haven't even put the dotted the I's and across the T's, or even written the T's or the I's on that US trade deal. A lot of it was just sort of, we're going to do a deal. They took off some of the tariffs on steel and cars, but the rest of it hasn't really been agreed yet. So that's still up in the air, isn't it?
Yeah, but I reckon he'll back off now, and I reckon possibly Australia and New Zealand might as well.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Thank you very much indeed for that, John. Alan is in Salford. Alan, what do you want to say?
If I can, just two points,
Yeah.
Julia. The first one is the Brexit one, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes, we've made a deal, this sort of treaty we've made. What a load of nonsense. We've got to go to their standards now, to the EU standards. They're not making us, we've not had a discussion on what where we are on.
And we've got no say either.
We've got to go to theirs.
Yeah.
So it's not a treaty. It's treachery, to be honest with you. With a massive T.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. But I mean, again, we've got a democratically elected Prime Minister. He can put anything through Parliament. I know there's a statement in Parliament at about 12:30 today, and I don't know if this has to go to a vote or not, actually. I don't think it does. I mean, he's entitled to do this. That's the reality. He got elected.
We know what he's like. He's always wanted to be back in Europe, hasn't he? But
do you think this is just the first step of just gradually, step by step?
He's got. What has he got? 4 more years to do this.
Yeah.
No danger. That's his game. He wants to retire in Europe, that guy. He'll end up on the top table.
Same with Tony Blair. He wanted more than anything in the world to be president of the EU. It comes to the great pensions. It's just kudos travelling around the world, all these big summits. They love all that stuff. I mean, my thing was always that Keir Starmer was on the same side as the EU. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a total capitulation.
It was. Now, can I get my second point?
Yes, sorry, I forgot you had a second one. Yeah.
No, this is. I've got skin in this one because my grandson's 17 now. He's 18 in September. He's been in college for a year. He'll be doing 2 years college as a joiner.
Yeah.
Now he's throwing, CVs about left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
He's been working since he was 16, so he's got the work ethic.
Sounds like a good lad.
Well, he does, but let's have it right. All the kids in this country, they always say, they're 16 to whatever. They all want to sit back and take 40 grand. Not all of them. There's a lot of good kids out there. Yeah. But now, with this national insurance thing, and with this new thing he's bringing in to bring kids from abroad, he's actually condemning my grandson, to the dole.
Because there's going to be, again, we haven't got that agreed yet, but if a load of young people from Europe are able to come to this country, there's going to be more competition for those jobs. I don't know how many of them are going to be doing joinery. I mean, at least he's actually doing a useful skill, not media studies or something like that.
Electricians, we need these people.
Yeah.
We need these in this country. That's the trouble.
I have a funny feeling that your grandson will do just fine because you've either got your head screwed on and you've got the work ethic or you haven't, and I reckon it sounds like he's his grandfather's grandson, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but they're not getting a chance, Julia. He's actually told me now, he's only 17, he's going to get his trade and do a few years here, but he's out of this country. Isn't it good?
Where does he want to go?
He doesn't know, but he says he's definitely not staying here.
This is one of my biggest fears, is that our brightest and our best are going to go abroad because they'll feel they haven't got a future here. That's a really good point. Alan, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Slater, can I bring you back in on his second point? I think this is an issue. I've got an 18-year-old just starting A-levels, and life ahead of her, and a lot of us, a lot of people going through the A-levels and the GCSEs right now. It is interesting. Like, so many young people just don't see that they've got a future here. That the country's being talked down, and they feel like this isn't somewhere that there's going to be sort of freedom to start a business or to get ahead.
No, absolutely. Just everything that they hear is incredibly bleak at the moment, isn't it? It's that at best things are going to get worse before they might get better. It's so clear that we've already gone through this period in which everything has just, the proverbial has hit the fan, whether it's the economy, whether it's, broadly speaking, just sort of life in this country has really degraded very quickly over.
Yeah.
And then this is the period in which a lot of people have been going through the last few years of school, might be going through university. You're not going to have a tremendous amount of optimism when you come out of that and see the prospects which you're confronted with. So it's easy to excuse me. It's easy to
So
overstate.
it's not an episode of The Fast Show.
Exactly. I'm slowly dying here.
Sorry.
Representing the fate of this nation as we lean into the abyss. No, but it's one of those things where one can overstate it. I'm sure there won't be people flocking, but there's certainly, you do see it anecdotally, people who have got something about them, who do want to start something in life, who find themselves, thinking, is this the place to do that?
Yeah, exactly. And especially in the area of tech as well, AI and things like that. You can't run an AI business without having absolutely reliable, ample, plentiful, very cheap energy. So you can't do that in this country. If everyone says that's the future, well, it ain't going to happen. It really ain't going to happen here. This is not the country to do it. Certainly not the EU. I mean, got no major tech companies started in the EU because of all the regulation and the cost. Right, so much more to go on. We're waiting for that Lucy Connolly appeal decision. As soon as we get that, whether or not she's going to be freed from that 31-month sentence for that tweet about Southport, I'll let you know as soon as we get that information. This is Talk. We are, of course, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Tom Slater's still with me. Also, we are going to keep you up to date as soon as we get that decision from the court about Lucy Connolly, her appeal against her 31-month sentence for that tweet. A very nasty, horrible tweet, but nevertheless, only a tweet that she then deleted on the date of the Southport attacks. She's appealing her sentence. We're waiting a written ruling from the judge, and we'll wait to find out what that decision is, whether she will be freed or not, at least have her sentence short shortened. As soon as we get it, we'll bring it to you here first. Right now, though, let's talk more about Brexit and Brexit betrayal and Starmer's surrender. Oh, yeah, plenty of alliteration in those headlines today. Done up like a kipper is the headline on The Sun. I wonder if the political editor of the New European, James Ball, agrees with any of those words. Very good morning to you, James.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I'm guessing you were one of the people celebrating yesterday. A nice glass of, obviously, French champagne, certainly not English sparkling wine, to celebrate basically heading us back into the EU. That's pretty much what happened yesterday, isn't it?
I mean, honestly, I'm happy enough with this deal, but I feel like I should be on here sort of shouting outrage and betrayal, and the Brexiteers should be delighted. Huh? This makes it less likely we go in because it fixes a whole bunch of the running issues that came up by Brexit that people like me could point to. Queues at the border, the inability to export. You know, if you want to talk fishermen, the fact you couldn't sell the catches because the export rules and the food safety checks caused so many problems. This gets rid of those issues. It settles things at least until the next election, but for a decade. Like, I don't love this deal. I liked being in the EU.
You want to go further?
A lot of practical problems go away.
It doesn't solve passport queues. There was nothing in the Brexit deal that required any EU country to put us in a different queue. Interestingly, of course, lots of countries didn't. I mean, Portugal, for instance, it's different at different airports. Nothing in this deal that would actually change that. Just the EU won't be telling people, oh, you ought to do that. Inability to export. Plenty of our businesses have been able to continue their exports to the EU since Brexit. There hasn't been an issue. I'm just not quite. I'd say that's a little bit of should we say, over-egging the pudding, I think, a little bit there, James.
I will cheerfully admit that the government over-egged the pudding, like every government does with every deal. The passport gates one really annoyed me. I used the e-gates last week. They're talking nonsense there. But
you said that was one of the issues.
Our farmers were I did not cite the e-gates. I would not dare. The farmers and food have found it very hard to export. That's been a big problem. That's a sector that's suffered enough. It's not one that Labour plays very well with, but it is welcome.
But whose fault was that?
And if you look, the food sector
that wasn't a fault of Brexit. That was a decision by the EU to make life more difficult. Lots of things, for instance, us allowing EU passengers, for instance, to use our e-gates and not being tit for tat petty. You know perfectly well a lot of the downsides of Brexit, such as they exist, because I believe national sovereignty and democratic accountability trump any issues on that front. A lot of those problems are simply created by petty Brussels bureaucrats who wanted to punish us for leaving the club, because no country can be allowed to leave because the club is so great, you mustn't allow anyone to leave it.
I mean, I'm going to shock you here, Julia. I don't actually have the EU constitution tattooed to my forehead, and I don't wake up every morning to ode to joy.
Are you sure? I bet if we move that camera, there'll be an EU flag, those yellow stars glinting at me.
No, I mean, I genuinely, I rather dislike the EU and the way it operates. But I also take the view that if you have a big protectionist club that bullies all the people outside of it, that borders you on every side and is the world's biggest trading bloc and trading partner, you're better being inside it than just outside it.
You're better to be the bully, not be bullied.
I mean, frankly, yes. I mean, this is what we've seen. I'm very pragmatic.
I mean, put that on a poster and sell that to the British people. Doesn't that tell you everything, though?
Honestly, Julia, I think if we'd put that in a poster in 2016, we might not have left the EU.
Can I say the amount of times Ramonas have told me all the reasons why we wouldn't have left the EU. People voted to leave the EU because they wanted to, quote, take back control, not because of what was written on the side of a big red bus. Do you think Keir Starmer thinks that he can basically take us back under the auspices of the EU, the European Court of Justice over food and agricultural products and the standards, and take us back, into this carbon emissions scheme, and even the possibility of youth-free movement? They're going to call it a youth scheme or youth experience scheme, but call it what you want. It's going to be young people from other European countries with higher unemployment rates coming to this country, competing with our young people for jobs. Do you think that he think that we're just all a bit too stupid and we're not going to notice?
I honestly don't think he does. I think this is Keir Starmer in his real arch-pragmatist, sort of boring, plodding way, trying just to get a working trading relationship with Europe that we don't have to revisit and turn into a psychodrama all the time. I think he's sick of all of this done like a kipper stuff. I would love a deal that was sneaking us back into the EU. I'd quite like us to rejoin the customs union. This sort of youth movement, it's very popular. It polls brilliantly. People are generally quite pro-European youth movement, but as I understand it, we're going to cap it. We're going to have capped numbers of visas. Yeah. Oh, honestly, it's one of the odd ones. People dislike immigration in general. They want the numbers to come down. Talk about youth movement or things like Erasmus and explain them. They poll gloriously. I've never understood why, but they do. People
Erasmus is about students. I mean, again, another benefit for the EU, because the EU doesn't have any top 50 universities. We, of course, do have 5 of the top 50 universities. EU doesn't have any. I mean, there's a reason why they want to come here, isn't there?
I mean, they would love the home fees, and if Starmer conceded on that, I would be extremely surprised, and I think there would be a big backlash. The deal doesn't do that. One good thing it does is we are still outside the EU for lots of bits of regulation. The UK actually has the best AI industry outside of the US. We don't train models here, but that's cheap data center work. We have a load of the very skilled AI jobs here. We can do that. We have a big energy sort of cooperation with the EU. We need that. We've not.
Well, no, we need that because of net zero policies. But now we won't be able to get out of any net zero policies because the carbon emissions trading scheme.
In nuclear.
We haven't invested in any industry properly. But that's the point. But again, I don't think tying ourselves to the EU, where you've got Germany's economy is in a terrible state because of their net zero policy. Many other countries as well. I'm not quite sure that's the solution. Can I come back to the fishing issue, because that's the one that's very, very clear cut for people, isn't it? Although I'm sure you don't know anyone working in the fishing industry. I certainly don't live on a coastal town that's dependent on it. But it's a very visceral reaction for people who are born on an island nation. We can look at a map. We can see we've got our own fishing area. You know, for some reason, we thought we'd leave it in the hands of the EU, the French and the Spanish trawlermen for quite a few years as part of the deal to get out, which Boris Johnson signed. And now we're looking at, apparently we were going to roll it over by another year and then 4 years. Now it's 12 years. Why on earth would we give up our rights to our own waters to the French and the Spanish fishermen? What did we get in return for that?
I actually used to cover fishing. I used to work at the grocer. I covered food manufacture. So, I mean, look, it's a romantic notion and we have towns that rely on it and no one wants to lose jobs. But there are 6,500 full-time fishermen. If you want a comparison for that, there's about 11,000 yoga instructors and about 7,000 tattooists.
Yeah, but the difference is
it's part of our romantic national image.
No, the fishermen actually do a useful job. The reason why we have so few is because we gave away rights to our waters to the EU.
I mean, we don't. It's not.
We literally did and have just done again.
Economy. It hasn't been for decades. It is
because we've been in the EU for decades.
The future of Britain is not fishing. I mean, the future of Iceland is barely fishing, and it's about 20% of their economy. Like it is ridiculous that it's had 10 times the airtime of energy.
No one is pretending this is the future.
We are an advanced modern industrial economy.
And that's
fishing
fine.
is a fraction of a fraction.
But we still need food, and it's part of our food industry.
Good for fishing because the fish that our trawlermen dig up are not the fish that we most like to eat. Dig up, fish up. Terrible. Yeah, you can tell I'm a real expert here. But the fish that they collect are not the ones we like to eat. Most British caught fish are sold in Europe. And the checks on the border were causing absolute
But that doesn't
chaos.
mean you have to give up our fishing rights to the French. Can I just ask you, just finally, because time's against us, do you think this is all part of a cunning wheeze by Mr Ramona-in-Chief Keir Starmer, who tried to stop Brexit from happening in the first place from 2016 to 2019, had to give up because Labour lost that election then, that this is a secret cunning plan to take us back in by hook or by crook, by stealth?
I'd love a secret plan to get us back in there. I do not think this is part of one. I think you have the weird world now where the only people that take Brexit seriously are Remainers. Brexit, it's turned into I don't know what I want, but I don't want this. This deal's terrible. The India deal's terrible. The USA deal's terrible. Whatever happens is a betrayal because there was no Brexit that Brexiteers agreed on. they had 9 years in power. Like, there's been a long time to come up with something for Brexit, and it's actually taken a Remainer to come along and find a working deal that keeps it out of the EU but trading with it.
The mischaracterisation of Brexiteers by Remainers is always absolutely fabulous. Still never met a single person who voted for Brexit who doesn't think it was the greatest vote they've ever cast in their lifetime and the right thing to do and will remain right until the end of time. But there we are. What do I know? I'm just a Brexiteer. James Ball, not a Democrat, but he is a political editor of the New European. Thank you so much for joining us. Quick reaction from Tom Slater to that.
Nothing if not honest, which is refreshing to hear sometimes.
Absolutely. Just to let two bits of breaking news. We haven't got Lucy Connolly's appeal court judgment, but we have got an announcement by the UK for wide-ranging sanctions on Russia. The thing is, any sanctions that come on Russia now, like, why didn't you bring those in way back when? Also, interesting, although we don't know what's going to happen to Lucy Connolly, still behind bars, Tommy Robinson, whose of course real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. It's just been announced that the High Court that he's going to be released from prison within the next week after his 18-month sentence for the civil offence of contempt of court. This is over that libellous video he kept sending out, which was clearly in contempt of court repeatedly, has been reduced by 4 months. That's a decision by the High Court. But Stephen Yaxley Lennon, a.k.a. Tommy Robinson, will be out of prison within the next week. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, going to talk about Gary Lineker. He's lost out on 800k in a payoff from the BBC. Oh, diddums. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Hamas is a dictatorship. It's sexist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and it oppresses Palestinian people. They don't have freedom of speech, they don't have the right to protest, they can't form trade unions. It's a very repressive regime. And in the last 2 months, there's been a wave of anti-Hamas protests throughout Gaza, which have been very savagely repressed by Hamas. And then, one by one, they're identifying some of the people who protested and having them executed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Keep those calls coming in about the Brexit betrayal. Fascinating to talk to James Ball, Remainer, staunch Remainer. He thinks the deal doesn't go far enough. Dear God, I mean, don't worry, we'll be back in the EU before the end of the Parliament, mark my words. Anyway, let's talk about somebody who's probably cheering that on as well, because he's a bit of a Remainer as well, wasn't he? Gary Lineker. But I think we should be feeling sorry for Gary Lineker. Not only has he lost his job at the BBC, lost his reputation as a good guy, because, I don't know, putting anti-Semitic stuff online genuinely does do that for you, but he's lost out an £800,000 payoff from quitting the BBC. I know, we're all going to start a crowdfund for him, and I'm sure one of the contributors will be Rebecca Ryan. She's campaign director at Defund the BBC. Very good morning to you, Rebecca. Are you upset for Gary today?
Not at all, no, bless him. I think he's got enough money in the bank anyway, hasn't he? And it's about time he slung his hook. So, yeah, no, happy to see him go.
Well, it is interesting because, I mean, you want to defund the BBC. Again, I think there's a lot of things wrong with the BBC. I'd like to keep the BBC going, but just doing a better job and for less money. And I don't want to be sent to prison for not getting a licence fee. But I mean, certainly 1.3 million quid he was on. So, I mean, actually, we can defund the BBC a little bit more, can't we?
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing, is that he has been sort of a figure of hate for many of our supporters for a long time. So it's probably a very good thing for the BBC to finally get rid of him. I mean, it's pretty obvious that he was pushed before he jumped, but to have that sort of save, his dignity protected, to say that he's decided to go, then great. But yeah, absolutely. It's a refreshingly strong move from the BBC, and it will be in their favour. But it has taken a long time to get rid of him. It has taken a huge amount of pressure. We've had all of the main Jewish groups applying pressure in mainstream media. We've had Danny Cohen, the former chairman of the BBC, and then also BBC employees themselves, Jewish employees, saying,
enough is enough. I still think that actually the reason he's gone is because he's in the interview he did with the BBC's Amal Rajan, where he talked about how you were complicit, you're almost complicit if you don't speak out about Gaza, although apparently he's complicit in every other tragedy in the world and war in the world, because he doesn't speak out about those. No concern about any of those children dying, apparently. Not at the hand of Jews, so it's not an issue for him, not complicit. But he also slagged off the new BBC chief of sport, for saying no TV experience. I have a funny feeling that slagging off your boss at the BBC might be a bigger crime than putting out anti-Semitic emojis.
Absolutely, and his previous boss, they've had a full-on loving with him, didn't she? So I think that was certainly a major contributing factor to his departure. But yeah, that interview that he did with the Telegraph, I believe, was probably a final nail in the coffin, because he was clearly just doubling down, and he wasn't going to be quiet on this subject. So time for him to go.
Well, he genuinely viewed himself, it's clear, as being, above the fray, that the rules didn't apply to him. There were lots of people within the BBC spoken out publicly, and people spoke to me privately there, like, I'm not allowed to do this. I don't work in the political or the news field, but I'm not allowed to speak out on issues that I feel strongly about. But he is. But also, I do think if he spoke out in a different way for different political topics and from a different point of view, he would have been out on his ear much quicker. If he had spoken out in favour of Israel, if he'd spoken out in favour of Brexit, if he'd spoken out in favour of Reform UK or the Tories or anti-mass immigration, all the things he posed, I mean, I think he'd have been out on his ear years ago. It's just the views he had were acceptable as mainstream views in the BBC.
Absolutely. Very fashionable views in the sort of middle-class avocado-eating dinner party set of North London.
Oh, don't talk about my people like that. But that's the truth, isn't it? That he got away with it for so long because they didn't really have a problem with anything he said.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. And he's pushed and he's pushed and he's pushed. But, he's come to the end of the line with the... I don't think you can get away with using those anti-Semitic tropes. And he's... Yeah. We talked about last week, the flagrant sort of ignorance. Is he an innocent bumbling around in a topic he knows nothing about, or is he a hugely powerful man, the top paid so-called talent at the BBC, who's given this massive platform? It's dangerous. You can't then claim that you weren't aware, and even if you had seen the emoji, that you wouldn't have put two and two together.
But also, if you don't understand the the anti-Semitic tropes, maybe you don't understand enough about the topic, and maybe you shouldn't be retweeting stuff that you don't understand. That would be my top tip on that. Absolutely. Well, we should see it. He's lost out 800,000 payoff by basically if he'd been forced to go officially as opposed to resigning. But he's got a load of podcasts. He's got his Walker's sponsorship. Word word is he might be going to ITV, so we'll see about that. But again, we're not paying his wages. He doesn't have to agree to the BBC contract about keeping it stum on politics, so that's his business. But there we are. Rebecca Ryan, campaign director at Defund the BBC. Thank you for that. Tom Slater, I imagine you've got a lot of sympathy for Gary losing out the 800k because, you know, times is hard.
No, exactly. It's not as if he's got a podcast empire to fall back on. And the many millions that he's surely amassed at the taxpayers' expense over the years so far.
Do you think he'll give us a podcast? Because I'm sure he likes lots of alternative viewpoints.
What would we call it? The rest
podcast?
is ... It would have to just, you know...
Yeah.
I dread to think. People can call in and make a suggestion.
Call in, yeah. What will our podcast be? I mean, I want...
It fits the format, because it's two people who broadly agree on most things being presented as if they're, you know, completely...
Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell nodding along to each other and getting everything wrong.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything wrong. It's quite mind-blowing how much they can be wrong about things.
Gary Lineker managed to be even more mind-numbing to listen to than those two, so that's a hell of a achievement.
I liked him on football.
No, exactly.
He's good on football.
It's a real tragedy in that sense. It's like, if only he could have kept his mouth shut.
Absolutely. Anyway, more coming up. Hopefully we'll get that result on the Lucy Connolly appeal. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for joining us today. Lots coming up. We are still awaiting a decision from the courts about Lucy Connolly. She's the mother and childminder sentenced to 31 months behind bars for a very nasty, admittedly, very, very nasty tweet that she wrote on the day of the Southport attack last July, which got sent sentenced to 31 months. She's been appealing last Thursday her sentence. We're going to await the written ruling from... I don't know why the judges couldn't give a ruling last week. I don't know why it has to be written today, but that's what we're waiting for. It's due to come out from 10:30. We'll let you know soon as we get that news. But we have had that breaking news that Tommy Robinson, a.k.a. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, will be released sometime in the next week after an appeal court, a High Court decision where his 80-month sentence has been cut down by 4 months. So he will be released in the next week or so after his sentence was reduced after that contempt of court case against him. All that coming up. Right now, though, let's talk more about the EU, because, of course, we've had the, Starmer's surrender, Brexit betrayal, you name it, done up like a kipper is the Sun headline after Keir Starmer basically tried to drag Britain back into the EU under his reset deal with Brussels. He insisted it would be a win-win for Britain and would deliver a £9 billion boost to the economy. I think that's every year from a certain point, but given that some estimates saying we're going to have to pay in to get some of these things back, so we're going to have to pay probably something like 16 billion in. There is no deal with the EU where we don't have to pay more than we get back. That's kind of one of the reasons why, they wrote that stuff on the side of that big red bus in 2016, yeah? Well, lots of critics have pointed out this is surrendering access to our coastal waters to European fishermen for 12 years, agreeing on talks for a future youth mobility scheme where young people, 80 million of them would like to come, apparently, would be able to bring their families even. That may be something of a sticking point. And, of course, new rules on food and agriculture regulations, which mean that if we did actually want to leave that, we would be paying a penalty. Oh, yeah. And the added bonus of higher energy bills for all of us because of an agreement limiting the UK's ability to drop on net zero targets because we have joined the EU carbon emissions market. It all sounds like an absolute disaster, which is indeed what it is. Also, we are going to be talking about Donald Trump appearing to offer Russian President Vladimir Putin in a 2-hour phone call yesterday a large-scale trade deal if they agree to end the war with Ukraine. But we'll wait and see what happens there. Just to let you know, we've got the breaking news regarding Lucy Connolly, and it is bad news in the Court of Appeal. Lucy Connolly, the wife of a Conservative councillor, and a childminder, a mother of one, has had her bid to appeal her 31-month prison sentence for inciting racial hatred online after the Southport attacks dismissed at the Court of Appeal. I mean, 31 months. We're told constantly by the Prime Minister, the Justice Secretary, the Home Secretary and others, there are too many people behind bars. We need to let out people. Latest plan is to let out people early on licence, people who have committed domestic abuse, who've been violent attackers. They're being released early from prison. But Lucy Connolly, a woman with no criminal record, a mother of one, a childminder, who wrote, yes, a foul, a horrible, nasty tweet, who pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred online after even deleting that tweet after just 3.5 hours on the day of the Southport attack. She is serving 31 months behind bars. Hasn't even been allowed any weekend release to see her daughter and her husband, for whom she was a carer, at all. Absolutely shocking. Don't worry, though, Tommy Robinson's going to be out later this week, having had his sentence cut for contempt of court. Tom Slater is editor of Spiked Online. Lots more to talk about. We're going to be getting calls on Brexit and betrayal, but we have two-tier justice in this country, don't we? What's your reaction?
Well, it's another reminder of the warped priorities of our justice system in exactly the way you talk about. I mean, there's often a lot of comparisons between Lucy Connolly and this particular form of crime, what have you. The one I think really illuminates this is she was given 31 months for this deeply unpleasant, vile tweet.
2.5 years.
There are people, there's a guy called Philip Prescott, he rioted in Southport. He was part of that mob which menaced that mosque. He got 28 months. This is a state which seems to be obsessed with words even more so than deeds in certain actions. And of course what she said was despicable. I just think people who say despicable things should be met with condemnation, with criticism, not with lengthy jail sentences. It just seems to me to be a terrible use of police resources. And also, if we want to know where these malign views exist in society. I would rather that they were out there
we knew
saying
what they
them
were.
than we could
I mean,
tackle.
at the time when it was all reported, I remember saying, lock her up, throw away the key. I was very horrified by it. She pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred. She did that, we understand now, a brilliant interview with Alison Pearson of The Telegraph with her family, that basically she did it because she was told that you're on remand, no one's getting bail, you may not even get your case heard until, not even get the first court appearance until, this was last July, until this new year. But you'll get a shorter sentence if you plead guilty, and that's what hundreds of people did. Now, some of those people, well, quite a lot of those people, were absolutely guilty of crimes. You say you're amassing outside an asylum hostel, and you're throwing bricks at the police. You're shouting abuse. You absolutely are a danger, and we need to throw the book at you. But writing something, no matter how horrible, this is the post she wrote. She deleted it 3.5 hours later. Mass deportation now. Set fire to all the effing hotels. She used the full word, full of the B words, for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. It was claimed in court that she had written other racist tweets. And again, that was my she's clearly a wrong and she's a nasty little piece of work. The tweets the other posts that she'd made, they weren't racist. They were concerns about immigration. Lot of mitigating factors for her case. Never committed a crime before. No offences before. She was a mother of a young child, carer to her husband, a childminder. She deleted the post herself. She had a very important mitigating factor. She had lost a child at 19 months in mishap. Just things that went horribly wrong in a hospital with her child. She was clearly triggered and traumatised by the news that 3 young children had died. God, we were all horrified on that day in late July last year of Southport. That she was clearly triggered by that, and had a visceral reaction, wrote some horrible things, deleted them. The idea that, when I look back at it in the cold light of day, and that's what courts are supposed to do, the idea that is something that should be punishable by any time in prison at all, let alone by 31 months. I think I got it wrong. I got it wrong last year when I said that about her. I absolutely hold my hands up to it. It's just wrong.
I think also the key consideration here should speech and opinion be a criminal offence? And whether or not, I get that mitigation is important in court cases.
If you say turn up at this asylum hostel at 4 p.m. and we're going to set it on fire, that is absolutely a criminal
sending
offence.
out, location details and how to make a Molotov cocktail to a receptive Telegram group, that's very different from just sort of screaming into the ether, which is what happened here. I get that mitigating circumstances are important to court cases, are important to us understanding the individual at the centre of it. Personally, I think people could have been horrified by Southport and not suddenly taken to Twitter and talk darkly about burning
neither of us felt
hotels.
the need to do that.
And I think most people wouldn't either. Maybe that is indicative of a character to a certain degree, but really it's kind of irrelevant.
You don't have to like
It's the fundamental principle of, is this proportionate? Absolutely not. Should this be a crime at all? In my view, no, because anything that is still in the realm of opinion and a rant should not be treated in the same way. Serious.
There's no evidence that she actually incited any single person. It was seen by a few 100,000 people that any single person was moved to that. So that's the news that Lucy Connolly has been seen her appeal against her 31-month prison sentence dismissed at the Court of Appeal. We're going to be talking to a legal counsel at Free Speech Union about that in just a few moments. Let's go back to Brexit though. Lots of calls, texts coming in. If you want to get in touch about Lucy Connolly, please do. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. But there's talk about this, EU surrender pact, Starmer surrender, Brexit betrayal, and the like. It seems to me, it's very, very clear to me that Keir Starmer reckons he can get away with this. He was very, very clear after the 2016 referendum that he wanted to try and stop Brexit from happening, that it was a horrible mistake. We're all a bit stupid and bigoted, and we'd been fooled by what was written on the side of a bus and by, the blonde mophead guy, Boris Johnson. And basically, he was going to try and stop it by hook or by crook. 2019, get Brexit done. Boris Johnson gets elected. Done. Can't do that anymore. So then they had to play along and pretend we completely respect the Brexit vote. Didn't for 3 years. Suddenly they did. He said that at the last election as well. But there was always this intention to take us back in by stealth, by hook or by crook, bringing us back into UE rule alignment under the European Court of Justice, ceding our waters, having a youth mobility scheme. We'll call it a youth experience scheme, and they'll be able to probably bring their families. He wants us to be ruled by Brussels. He thinks that being ruled by technocrats in Brussels and bureaucrats in Brussels is better for the country than being ruled by democratically elected people, elected by the British people. What does that tell us about what Keir Starmer thinks of the British people?
Contempt that he has for the British people. If that was what led him to campaign for a second referendum, he likes to pretend that he wasn't the architect of that policy when he was shallow Brexit secretary, but he absolutely was. And also, I just think this whole thing is demented. Like, the idea that the future is the European Union, it's an economic basket case. It's politically explosive at the moment. You've got all kinds of parties arising, some of them genuinely quite unpleasant because of the fact that the centre is, unable to hold, that people are recognising that all of the policies on migration or net zero, what have you, that are being imposed from Brussels are starting to infuriate larger and larger parts of the European electorate. It's a power that's in decline technologically. It's becoming increasingly left behind because of the over-regulation. Like, the idea that it's this panacea, aside from all the important democratic questions, which are definitely at the centre of the whole Brexit argument, it's just insane. It's just vibes. They just like the idea of it because they like the idea of politics being done over the heads of the people.
But also, there's this idea, isn't it? But it's a kinder, nicer, more civilised Europe. But then they descry the fact in the rise of the, quote, far right in Europe at the same time. And the fact that, all the things that the so-called right-wing, far-right parties in this country want to do, tackling mass immigration, legal and illegal and all of that, and crime, these are things that governments in Europe are trying to do or even successfully doing. But again, it's the future of the economy. We know that lies in the rising economies, India, Asia, China. We know that's where the future is. America is still a powerhouse economy in the world and will remain for a very long time. I mean, partly, again, it's got the Pacific and the Atlantic. It is just a huge military and economic power. But what I find extraordinary is that Europe doesn't have a future in any of the key industries. We're going to have a green revolution. Well, they can't afford, because of their energy prices, to make any of the solar panels and the wind turbine. If that is the future, really, that's why Germany's economy is collapsing and their manufacturing is collapsing. The reason why the new German Chancellor is so keen on building up defence is they're actually going to switch their manufacturing, which has completely collapsed, to manufacturing defence products. Not a bad thing for Europe, I think, but it's almost like an escape route for the German economy. But also AI. We're told AI is the future. Again, can't do AI unless you've got cheap, plentiful energy, which Europe does not have because they choose not to have. They choose not to frack. They choose not to rely on fossil fuels that are reliable. And even down to things like other areas of tech where you've got innovation. It's not an energy thing, but innovation. And pharmaceuticals. The regulation involved in Europe prevents any of that stuff from happening. And anyone who comes up with a good idea, they go to America or Britain or the Far East, because then you can actually do those developments. I mean, they're still opposed to GM foods, for goodness sake. They're so backward, and it's all protectionist. It's not forward thinking. It's not free thinking. It's not about free trade. Even our little Ramona, my good friend James Ball, earlier on for New European, was pointing out it's a protectionist bullying club. He said better to be inside it than outside it. What an argument for the EU.
There's a positive case.
What an argument.
And it just doesn't work. Like, the idea that the EU is superior, either because it's a kind of bully, effectively, or because of the fact that, you can do things more at scale, you can make decisions which can benefit people across the continent. We live in a time of a lot of crises which have shown how actually this big, clunking, anti-democratic structure is terribly equipped to deal with these problems. COVID is a great example. The vaccine rollout, Ukraine. Whenever an issue, migration as well, it's impossible to get that many different countries with that many different politics within them and different interests to agree on anything. So what you end up with is just more and more policies being imposed from on high, making things worse and infuriating the electorate, and we go again. The idea that it's the future is so demented.
It is utterly bizarre, isn't it? By the way, mentioning COVID, the World Health Organization has agreed their pandemic agreement, their pandemic treaty. And this is basically about having the World Health Organization unelected, unaccountable, totally and utterly beholden to China. We know that, don't we, for sure, since 2020, to basically oversee pandemic planning and what happens in the event of another pandemic, which there will be, because of global trade and because of, frankly, what keeps happening in Chinese labs. But bearing in mind the World Health Organization is going to be in charge of that. There won't be a vote in Parliament. No, we don't get a say. But this is the fascinating thing. They're the people who oversaw the disinformation, let's call it what it was, lies about where the COVID virus had come from. I mean, the odds are so clearly in favour of it being a Wuhan lab escape, and about whether lockdown policies were working, vaccine safety, I mean, they masked everything. They pushed lie after lie after lie, and damaging policy after damaging policy in breach of all known scientific evidence, because we had a pre-pandemic plan and it didn't involve lockdowns or masks for a good reason, because they don't work. They cause more damage than they do any good. And yet we're going to hand over our national powers to them. Brilliant. That's what I mean. Anymore? I mean, why do we even bother going to vote anymore, Tom?
It's incredible. Like, the World Health Organization is equal parts useless and malign. Like, it's useless insofar as the one thing it was supposed to be preparing for, which is kind of global pandemics, it was completely caught napping. It's not fit to oversee a tiddlywink competition, let alone a global response to a serious health threat. But then there's also the malign aspect, the way in which from the very beginning of the pandemic, they were basically just repeating CCP, Chinese Communist Party propaganda, saying that, it hasn't been human-to-human transmission yet. They were repeating that well late in the day, through to the question of actually the origins of the virus.
The stuff we know that they knew at the time were lies.
Exactly. They were a key part of that demonisation campaign against anyone who raised objections. So for them to be even given a tiny bit more power is
I mean, we should be out of the World Health Organization. Simple as that. There we are. Love to hear your thoughts on all of these topics. So much more we want to talk about, including Keir Starmer's popularity crashing at breakneck speed. The third arrest in relation to that spate of arson attacks on Keir Starmer's properties and former properties. Two men now charged, a Ukrainian and a Romanian. I mean, the plot certainly thickens on that. Also going to be talking more about Ukraine coming up as well, and taking your calls. I want to hear from you on all the topics we're talking about, including Brexit, betrayal. What do you make of that deal? Is this Keir Starmer just trying to take us back into the EU by stealth? Love to hear your thoughts on Lucy Connolly. She has lost the bid to appeal her 31-month prison sentence. That result just out in the last 10 minutes or so at the Court of Appeal. We'll be talking to the Free Speech Union's legal counsel, Jill Levine, about that up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
This is maybe the biggest cover-up ever in American politics. Surely rivals, or at least in the same division as Watergate, and it makes the medical cover-ups of FDR and JFK, seem trivial in terms of Woodrow Wilson. I should mention as well, who was that White House was basically run by his wife Edith during the last year or so of his presidency. But this one was particularly outrageous.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:22 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me. Just to get you up on that breaking news in the last 20 minutes or so, Lucy Connolly, she is the wife of our former Conservative councillor. She's also a person in her own right. Everyone always refers to her as that in the copy, but she's she was a childminder, a mother of one. She's the one who wrote that really a very unpleasant on tweet about after the Southport attacks. She got sentenced to 31 months behind bars after she pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred, but she has made an appeal last Thursday at the Court of Appeal against that sentence for best part of 2.5 years. She has had that bid dismissed at the Court of Appeal. Well, let's talk about that right now with Jill Levine. She's legal counsel at the Free Speech Union, who have been helping her with her case and indeed funding the cost of her barrister. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Jill.
Hi, Julia. Nice to meet you.
Appreciate you joining me. Did you expect this this case to be dismissed?
Well, we didn't really know which way it would go. We were obviously really hoping that it would go Lucy's way, and it is quite disappointing that it hasn't done so. But it was never a slam dunk. It was always, it could have gone either way, to be honest.
Because the argument was never that, that she was innocent. I mean, it's too late. She's pleaded guilty. She wasn't found guilty. She pleaded guilty. And again, for the reasons I just explained before the break, that actually people were being told, look, you're on remand. You're not going to get bail. You're going to be stuck behind bars for many, many months before you even get your first day in court. You might be better off just pleading guilty, get a low sentence, and then you'll be out. But what were the main arguments used in court last Thursday, arguing that this 31-month sentence was too much?
Well, there were two main arguments put forward. The first was that Lucy had conceded, or her defence team had conceded on her behalf, that she had intended to incite serious violence. And that's relevant in relation to how the sentence or the offence is categorised, because if you are at the highest level of culpability and you intend to incite serious violence, that attracts the highest level of sentence. Right. And Lucy was saying subsequently through her appeal that that's not what she intended to concede. So that was the first element of her appeal. The second was that in relation to the judge, in terms of balancing up both mitigating and aggravating factors and weighing them up, the argument was that the judge didn't weigh those factors up appropriately and had placed too much weight on one aggravating factor and had not placed sufficient weight on the many mitigating factors.
Well, what was the aggravating factor?
That she had placed that tweet at a time of social unrest, or during what they said was a sensitive social climate. But of course, she had posted this tweet on the day of the massacre itself.
There weren't any riots at that time.
Yes,
she took it down before there were.
Violence. Yeah, and she took it down within 3.5 hours. So that in itself was questionable in terms of a socially sensitive climate, in the sense that it was during a period of violence.
Yeah, indeed. And there was this whole thing. I'm always fascinated by the fact that the government has always said, we're going to come down hard on this. We want the toughest sentences, blah, 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 blah. Got to send a message out because of the social unrest that was going on. Yeah, absolutely. We don't want people rioting on the streets. We know what stops that, getting the police out early and dealing with it all very toughly. However, we're told also at the same time that the government doesn't in any way direct the courts about what they did and how they sentence. And yet, clearly, the courts were handing out tougher sentences at that time. So which is it? Do the ministers get a say or don't they?
Well, I think there's always a bit of a knee-jerk reaction when there's been a big event like this. And we've seen in previous times when there's been rioting that there's always an expediting of cases and a desire to, prosecute more forcefully and possibly give longer sentences. But poor Lucy, I think, was very unfortunate in this situation.
Yeah, because you want to send out a message like, hey guys, this is serious, you are going to get done. I mean, that's the idea, isn't it? But you say you're balancing the mitigating factors. I mean, there are quite a lot here. They're actually, got a young child, she's a carer for her husband, she works as a childminder. That is interesting that, one of the things that I don't think most people have known about, unless they were sitting in the court the whole way through last year, and Alison Pearson's brilliant piece in The Telegraph, after talking to her and the family, was that, that she had character references from many of of the immigrant families, people of colour, whose children she cared for as a childminder, who said she's not a racist, this isn't the case. We were told that she'd written other racist tweets. When we saw the actual messages, they weren't what I think most of us would characterise as racist. But also she herself had lost a child at just 19 months at hospital some years back. She had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. There is very likelihood that someone who has lost a child is going to be more viscerally upset and angered by the knowledge that children had been murdered than most of us.
Yes, and she'd also, quite importantly, during the riots themselves, and before she was aware that she was in trouble for her own tweet, had actually posted some messages urging people to remain calm, not to engage in any violence, and to protest peacefully. And that was raised, I think, in the court, but obviously didn't give as much weight to it as we would have liked them to.
Yeah. I mean, it does sound to me that this is an absurd case. I mean, again, absurd that she pleaded guilty. And again, I wish she'd had the wherewithal to get in touch with the Free Speech Union beforehand, because I know other cases you've got involved in, people, I mean, a case which I think were clearly, prima facie, not crimes. Some of the tweets, people saying, look, we should be having discussions about this. There's a serious issue here in terms of people in this country, who can do us wrong. And their juries are finding them not guilty. What a surprise, because they're seeing sense. Do you think if she'd pleaded not guilty, if this had gone to trial, would have gone to trial many months later, do you think she would have been found guilty? Do you think she would have got a 31-month prison sentence then?
Well, it's really hard to say, but evidence suggests that juries tend to be from a much wider cross-section of society and tend to be the sort of common sense voice in everything, and they tend to have a bit more empathy, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's possible that a jury would have seen the wider context of this and would have seen Lucy for what she is, which is a law-abiding citizen who just goes about her day-to-day life.
Who wrote something nasty in the heat of the moment. And again, a lot of people will have done that. I mean, privately, maybe not publicly. But I think there's something that Tom Slater from Spiked Online pointed out a few moments ago. She got a longer sentence than at least one, probably a lot more, of people who've actually been convicted of being involved in a riot, turning up to an actual riot, being involved in physical altercations. How on earth can we have a situation in our courts where someone writes something that's up for 3.5 hours, and someone who actually turns up and is actually a physical threat to people, getting that man gets a lower sentence?
Yes, it is strange. I mean, there was someone, I think, who was convicted of violent disorder, and I think they had thrown some metal at police and had a string of previous convictions for rioting. And I think they got 26 months. Yep. So something has gone a bit wrong here. I mean, one thing I would say is that with these prosecutions, under that particular section of the Public Order Act, there is a requirement to get Attorney General approval, and that approval is usually meant to be the fail-safe. So the Attorney General will go in and consider, is this in the public interest? Are there any freedom of expression rights we need to consider? And we would have hoped at that point that might have made sense for the AG to consider that this wasn't one to be prosecuted for that particular offence.
No, indeed. What happens next, Lucy Connolly? We know she hasn't even been allowed out on weekend release, which pretty much any other prisoner in her circumstance would be allowed. There's a decision for the prison governor, but there seems to be a lot of concern that they're unhappy that her family are speaking to the media, and this case is getting publicity. We've had the likes of Liz Truss, other senior figures of the Tory party still sort of saying she needs to be released. What is her next legal route to get out of jail?
Well, I think she just has to unfortunately serve the remainder of her sentence. I believe she's got a few more months to go, and then she will be a free woman, hopefully.
Because obviously no one serves she won't serve a full 31 months,
No, so I think she's due to be released in August, and so she will have some more months left to serve. This will come as a big blow to her and her family, because I know they were really, praying that she would be released now, and obviously that's not the case. But I think it's a very, very sad set of facts, and she will just have to see her sentence through.
Jill Levine, Legal Counsel at Free Speech Union, thank you very much indeed for that. Tom Slater, do you want to come back in?
No, it's just a reminder, I think, of how bizarre our approaches to serious problems that exist in society. You know, those riots last summer brought some really horrifying things to the surface. You know, simmering resentments, racial hatred spilling out onto the streets. To treat the way to respond to that is, well, we need to crack down on people who were tweeting horrible things. Just see, aside from it being a liberal and I think bad from a point of principle where free speech is concerned, it shows a tendency on the part of government to treat the symptoms rather than the cause.
As always,
And that's one thing that I think shines through all of this. And there's a lot of people who get caught in the crossfire of that.
And one of the key reports we've had into His Majesty's Inspector of Police, into the constabulary, I think, into the riots, was actually the motivation for most people was just like basically having a riot. They weren't politically, ideologically motivated. They hadn't read something on Twitter that made them think that they should go out and riot. It was actually most of the people who were involved in the actual physical violence were people who had long records for many other offences. They were just, it's same as, like, you know, football hooligans. They were just out on the streets wanting a ruck. Doesn't make it okay. Absolutely not. These people are a danger to the police, to some of the asylum seekers and others in hostels, and they need to have the book thrown at them. But again, not someone who writes a tweet, and I'm ashamed of myself for having got caught up in some of that. And again, I just think there was a lot of very poor reporting on a lot of these issues, and clearly appallingly bad advice. For the love of God, always seek good legal advice before pleading guilty to anything like that, certainly anything involving particularly words. I want to take a quick call on this because I know a lot of you want to get in touch on this. A lot of you getting in touch on Brexit. We'll get to more of those calls in the next half hour. But 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Gina is on the line. She's in Westcliff. Gina, you want to respond to this decision in the Connolly case?
Yeah, I do. I have been keeping a close eye on it as a mum of an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm absolutely horrified, absolutely gutted. That poor child. They're not taking that into account at all. The fact that she's been, you know, ripped from her mother.
Hold on a minute. Lots of people behind bars have got kids. I mean, we don't say men shouldn't go behind bars because they've got a kid.
What's happening to Ricky Jones? He was the one who was asking for throats to be cut and to get rid of them all. Labour councillor on bail until August. Nobody mentions him. I just don't understand.
Okay, I just want to be clear because for legal reasons I don't know that case, so I'm not. We're not in any way endorsing.
It was all over.
Okay.
I know.
Gina, there were so many of them. It's difficult to keep up on them. So.
Yeah. But he was the one that was asking for throats to be cut, and all the people that were around him that were cheering and chanting. I know who I would rather be in a room with, and I know I would rather my children rather be in a room with her than somebody like him who's on the streets.
And this is the key thing as well. Also, there were people who were involved in the riots who got lower sentences.
Well, exactly, absolutely. And the fact that she's not even allowed to see her child.
Yeah. When other inmates are.
There's no common sense about it, and I think they're just making an example of her. And the fact that she pleaded guilty, like Peter Lynch was told to plead guilty. That man held a placard up and he shouted at police. I'm not saying that's right, but what about the man at the airport that punched the police woman?
Right, OK, we're going to have to go. That's now sub judice, that case, so I have to stop you there, Gina. It's now all alleged. It's all alleged. Doesn't matter what you've seen on video. It's now alleged because we have to make sure that the justice system goes through. I mean, it's not that we've got a justice system anymore, but I definitely think we're looking at two-tier. It's just anyone who doesn't think it's two-tier, anyone thinks a lot of this stuff isn't political, I think it's just simply not paying attention. Gina, thank you for that. I think you've got me in a lot of legal trouble, but thank you. Appreciate your call. 11:35 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be talking about what is going on with Ukraine after that phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and we'll be taking your calls on Lucy Connolly and on Brexit. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:38 is the time. Let's talk about what is going on in that small matter of that war going on in Europe that so many people don't seem to pay so much attention to, when they'd rather be talking about Gaza. But certainly Donald Trump says that it's a top priority for him to try and end that war, get the men out of the meat grinder, he says, in Ukraine. He had a 2-hour phone call with Vladimir Putin yesterday to talk about offers of trade deals with Russia if they're willing to agree to some sort of peace. Let's talk about this now with Igor Novikov. He's a former advisor to President Zelensky in Ukraine and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Igor.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank
Good morning from...
What do you make, certainly, of the reports we've seen of this conversation coming out of both the Kremlin and the White House about what actually took place in this phone call between these, well, two of the most powerful men on the planet?
Well, realistically, what happened was Putin's delay tactics worked. So President Trump believes that we're going to be working on a memorandum to finalize a memorandum about a memorandum that will end the war at some point. What happened in reality was, do you remember that first Die Hard movie where Alan Rickman's Hans was sitting opposite, the CEO of that Japanese company?
Yeah.
Hostage, and the guy goes, well, I've signed billion-dollar deals with this man, so can I not make a deal with a criminal? And he had 2 minutes to live after that.
Yeah.
Well, that's exact analogy. That's exactly what happened on that phone call. So Trump thinks he can make a deal with a schizophrenic psychopath murderer, and that's not going to happen.
I mean, and that's the thing. It seems to me obvious to everyone around the world, and you don't have to be a Trump supporter or not. And in fact, it's interesting, even in America, a lot of Republicans, and certainly the majority of the American people, are not fans of Donald Trump's views on the situation in Ukraine. That Donald Trump is being made to look like an absolute fool. He's being taken for a ride by Vladimir Putin. Everyone, it seems, can see it. I'm pretty sure his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, can see it. I'm pretty sure the whole of the staff of the White House can see it. But he seems to be absolutely intent in believing that he's the deal maker. He can do a deal with Vladimir Putin, and it's a deal that will end the war. But the reality is, even if there were a deal, it's a deal that would basically leave Vladimir Putin able to seize the rest of Ukraine at any time, and is not a deal that anyone in Ukraine could realistically agree to.
Well, Julia, there's one way to make a deal with Putin, and Trump actually had that card. I mean, if you listen to what the Republicans in the Senate were saying, if you introduce 500% tariffs on any country dealing with Russia, including its shadow oil fleet, if you corner Putin and tell him, like, look, end this war or else, that would have gotten Trump a deal before autumn. Yeah. Now, I think realistically what we're looking at, Russia's going to go all in over the summer warfare campaign. Russia's going to be playing Trump with these delay tactics, trying to disrupt any aid to Ukraine to make sure that the summer campaign goes even better for them. And from that position onwards, towards October or November, Putin's going to get more realistic about his demands. And Trump will be facing, midterms in a year's time from that point in time. So he's going to be even more willing to create that illusion that he actually achieved something.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's interesting that J.D. Vance was talking while that phone call had been taking place, saying, look, if we're not going to be seeing a deal, we're going to walk away. This is Biden's war. There was this is Biden's war. We don't need to be involved in it. We have to look after American taxpayers rather than what's going on in Ukraine. There's a difference, isn't there, between the Americans walking away from peace talks, and there's a difference between that and walking away from Ukraine. And that is the big fear, not just of Ukrainians, I think also of many in Europe, and certainly my fear, that we will lose that US military aid and that US military know-how and technology and information that has been vital for the Ukraine war effort. If that were the case, I mean, and that's obviously what Vladimir Putin is counting on, that, string it out, eventually Trump gets bored, he walks away. Europe can talk a good game on providing military aid, but actually we can barely defend ourselves after decades of lack of investment in defence. That could mean the end of Ukraine, realistically, could it not?
I don't think it will mean the end of Ukraine. It will definitely put us in a difficult position, but Ukraine is a big country and it's a very resilient country. So definitely the end would be even worse than the one we are kind of looking at the moment. But I don't think it will be the end of Ukraine. But it will definitely be the end of the United States as the hegemon, because at the moment it would... There's one thing I can say that could be a bit polarizing and seem premature, but I think the trajectory that we're currently on, I think China is the new United States, unfortunately.
This is the worry. I've always said this to people when we talk about Syria, oh, the West shouldn't get involved, or the West shouldn't get involved. If America and the West don't get involved, you don't have America as the world's policeman. I hate to tell you who you end up with. You end up with Russia or China. Those are the options.
Not with Russia. Russia is China's...
Well, it's a basket case economy. We know that. But this is the thing. Can Putin walk away at all from this war, given that his entire economy is pretty much now in military mode? It's in wartime mode, and he's got, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of men, many severely injured, returning from war. I mean, if he doesn't have what he can play as a victory, what happens next?
Well, I think he can walk away from this war. I mean, I don't think he wants to, and I don't think he has to at this point, unfortunately, due to what's going on with the US. Now, this war, in some shape or form, this conflict, this kind of reshaping of the global order is going to continue, as far as Russia is concerned, until the final kind of straw, until the final regime change. So until Putin is dead, and I think realistically there's no way he's going to have... he's going to be replaced by anyone, including one of his cronies. There's a very small chance of that. Until he's dead, he's going to be causing trouble because now he's all in. So I don't see Russia returning to those peaceful ways. Trump will do everything in his power to make sure that happens because he wants that kind of economy boost for the United States by kind of unsanctioning Russia. It's not going to work, unfortunately.
Well, again, America, there were barely any sanctions from America on Russia at the beginning of the war because they didn't actually do very much trade with Russia, of course, whereas the European Union did. I mean, again, we've apparently announced more sanctions today, and it makes you wonder all these years in why whatever sanctions we've put on, that they weren't already in place. Really good to talk to you, Igor Novikov, former advisor to President Zelensky. Thank you for that. I mean, it's a pretty pessimistic conversation there. Tom Slater is the editor of Smacked Online, still with us in the studio. The only hope, it seems to me, is that Vladimir Putin overplays his hand, which I think he kind of has already done. And Donald Trump realises he's being made to look like a chump, which he is. He's literally a laughingstock on this issue, and that he realises that he needs to be showing America as the power in the West, the force for democracy that it should be, and he defends Ukraine militarily and does everything he can.
No, absolutely, and it's unearthed, I think, a lot of the contradictions in how the Trump administration is dealing with this war, because they're not really strictly isolationist in the sense that they're just quite happy to kind of recede within their borders, and they want to have their cake and eat it. They want to maintain America's position as the global hegemon, but at the same time...
That's the word of the day, by the way.
No, exactly. As in the superpower, the one who basically sets the terms and who any country would be loath to get on the wrong side of, keen to kind of, posture and muscle flex at certain points, but at the same time, seemingly...
walk away when they want to.
Exactly, kind of signalling that they're not particularly interested in this quite clearly.
You're either the world's policeman or you're not. You've got to kind of pick a side. I do get the whole, why should the American taxpayers be paying for this? Okay, I think European taxpayers should be paying more for it. I really do. I think there's a price to defend peace and democracy. There is a price. And we're more at threat, we should be paying more.
No, absolutely. And that's one thing which as I think the penny has started to drop for European powers, even if they're a little bit still slow to act on it.
It's going to take them 3 years to even make a bullet.
No, exactly.
That's how
useless
they are.
They'll have a lot of conferences and photo ops and tweets.
But by all means, let's go all in with the EU on their inability to defend themselves, because they were so quick to act when Ukraine was invaded, weren't they? Oh, no. That was us and the Americans. Oh, what a surprise. 11:47 is the time. Just to bring you a line from regarding the Lucy Connolly case. She's lost her appeal against her 31-month sentence, but her husband, who's a former Conservative councillor, Ray Connolly, he said he was heartbroken that her appeal bid was dismissed, adding, "My wife has paid a very high price for making a mistake and today the court has shown her no mercy. Coming up, we're going to take some calls on this and also calls on Brexit betrayal. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Don't forget, calls are charged at the national rate. You can text us on 87222. Text costs us £1, standard network rate message. Get in touch on X as well at talkTV. This is Talk.
This is maybe the biggest cover-up ever in American politics. Surely rivals, or at least in the same division as Watergate, and it makes the medical cover-ups of FDR and JFK, seem trivial in terms of Woodrow Wilson. I should mention as well, who was that White House was basically run by his wife Edith during the last year or so of his presidency. But this one was particularly outrageous.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:49 is the time. To say Tom Slater's still with us, and lots of people getting in touch on Brexit, also getting in touch about Lucy Connolly. A lot of people just absolutely, I think, are stunned by the fact that this mother, childminder, woman who has no criminal record is serving 31 months behind bars for a admittedly horrible, nasty tweet. It was a horror. Even she in the tweet admitted, yeah, if that's racist, so be it, in relation to the Southport attack and her concerns about immigration. I think a lot of people felt a lot of the concerns on the day of that Southport attack, and again the misinformation that was around on social media. Some of us spotted early on. I remember seeing the claim that it was an asylum seeker early on that was responsible, and then looked back where that information came from and realised that wasn't true. I've made mistakes before in terms of, I think, the Sydney attack on social media, so don't want to make that mistake again. But certainly I would never have written what Lucy Connolly wrote. I don't have those feelings in my heart, and I wouldn't have written them. You don't have to like someone or agree with someone to think that perhaps 31 months behind bars. Well, in fact, she won't serve all of that. She's likely to be out in August. So she'll basically spend a year behind bars. For a short tweet that was only up for 3.5 hours, which she has self-deleted. The Court of Appeal has said that no, she will not see her sentence reduced. And her husband, former Conservative councillor Ray Connolly, he was a councillor at the time of the tweet, said he was heartbroken that her appeal bid was dismissed, saying, "My wife has paid a very high price for making a mistake, and today the court has shown her no mercy." Let's go to your calls on this. 0344 499 1000. Mike is in Stoke-on-Trent. Hello, Mike. What do you want to say?
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
First thing, I will make sure I do not say anything about any active case that's on.
Thank you very much indeed. That will help me out well.
Yeah. Well, 2 or 3 very quick things. Lucy Connolly, I believe, is what they call a political prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can only go by what has been said in the media a lot. What she said was wrong. I don't disagree with that. She should deserve some punishment.
Yeah.
I think she received very bad legal advice in the beginning. But gone to Free Speech Union.
Yeah.
But, I mean, at the end of the day, from what I can gather, she's been denied access to a husband and a child. Now, how many other prisoners are under such strict...
This is the weekend release that the prison governor, we understand, is not letting her have. I mean, there's just no reason why a woman who, a mother and everything, wouldn't be allowed to go and see her child who's on her sentence. It's completely typical and normal that certainly a female prisoner in her circumstances with no criminal record previously would be allowed to do this.
You know, I mean, but sometimes, I mean, there's the other gentleman that you mentioned, I was a gentleman loosely, who got 28 months for rioting.
Yeah.
It just seems very, very disproportionate. I mean, all right, I am biased, I can't say as I'm not. I blame this straight down at Starmer. He went on and he vilified everybody and everything in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
And I think, in his own way, he instigated a lot of this.
He stirred a lot of it up, didn't he? And again, it's not just two-tier justice; it was two-tier policing as well, because there are people who've not been prosecuted for some things. I think of another case which said no one. There's been no police investigation whatsoever of a tweet, someone on the other side of things talking about how Muslims had been attacked, an acid attack on a woman, completely and utterly untrue. But oh no, it's fine. He's on the left. He hasn't been prosecuted. I don't want him prosecuted, but I don't think there should be prosecutions on the other side either.
No, but all I would like to see is a little bit of fair justice around the country. I mean, you look at a lot of what's going on now, and everything just seems to be going, excuse me for phrase, to hell in a handbag.
Yeah,
and,
I agree with you.
You know, I mean, things like that. I mean, if I can quickly change on to the other subject of our Great Reset deal, what gives him the right to give our country away? Nothing at all.
He's a democratically elected Prime Minister, unfortunately.
Yeah, with 9.5 million votes. And to those 9.5 million people, I hope you're proud of yourselves.
Mike, thank you very much. Really appreciate your call. Let's go to Dave, who is in London. And Dave, you wanted to talk about the Brexit reset deal, the Starmer surrender, as it's being called. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I can't believe, Julia, I'm phoning up to talk about e-gates, but I believe a minister has put that forward as one of the benefits of the wonderful new deal that Mr. Starmer has done. In the bigger scheme of things, I'm not sure we live in a democracy anymore. I know we do technically. We all trot down to the polling booth every 5 years and put a little cross in a little box. But to be honest, people that get elected now, they're just trying to get into power, then they do what they want. So I think there really does have to be some way of saying, whatever you put in a manifesto, there is a legal obligation here. If you go so far away from it, you can be taken out as a government. We will not have to wait 4 years to take you out.
A sort of recall system for a whole government instead of just an MP who's committed a criminal offence or something.
Yeah, or just the things like, if you're going to stand for government, you have to have a certain type of manifesto or a contract, whatever you want to call it, and it is legally enforceable if you go against it. But anyway, on e-gates. I went to Lanzarote. I came back last night. We had e-gates going into Lanzarote, no problem. A bit of a queue, but it's nothing to do with e-gates.
Yeah.
Two flights landed at the same time.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's completely different at every airport on a different day in a different country. It's got sod all to do with Brexit.
No, exactly. And if you're waiting to collect bags in the baggage reclaim, the chances are you'll be standing there for a couple of hours anyway. But interestingly, in Lanzarote, it took a bit of time to get through the e-gates, which weren't working very well. And the bags were already there when we got through. And then coming back to London, straight through the e-gates, but we waited an hour for the bags. So
they were there. But this is the thing, all the Remainers who are obsessed with this, genuinely, I think going to and from their houses in Tuscany, I think, they are under some illusion. They never once queued for a passport check ever in their lives beforehand. Dave, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's leave e-gates aside, because by the way, they've not even agreed anything. They've been yapping on about that since Sunday, not even agreed anything. But Tom Slater, coming back to Brexit, because this idea that Dave says, technically we live in a democracy, but people get into power and they kind of do what they want. One of the key reasons I know that you and I both voted for Brexit was about democratic accountability, so that when something is done that we don't agree with, like opening the doors to millions of migrants, we can punish politicians, but they know they're going to be punished for it, but they still do it anyway.
They do. I mean, one would hope that the experience of the last few years would have made them realise that they can't get away with committing these kinds of frauds on the public, but they carry on doing it. I think it's positive and instructive that both Reform and the Conservative Party basically committed themselves to ripping up this deal if they get anywhere near power again. It is worth saying that whatever Keir Starmer cooks up with the European Union in this deal, in terms of the negotiations to come, this isn't like being a member locked in to the same degree that we were previously. So these things can be undone. We are a sovereign country at the end of the day.
But there'll be a penalty. He's deliberately done a deal where there'll be a penalty for coming out of, for instance, the agricultural and animal rules.
Oh, no, absolutely. But I think it's about sort of reminding ourselves and putting pressure actually on the opposition parties now to say that if you really are affronted by this on the basis of principle, then let's see a plan to actually rip this up and to ameliorate those issues that Starmer has put in place.
And let's have a choice, bearing in mind, you know, there really wasn't any choice really on EU issues for many years before the Brexit referendum. There hasn't been any choice on net zero pretty much in recent years. People often don't get a shot on some of the biggest issues in our democratic nation, the big policies that have huge impact on our daily lives, our freedoms, the democratic accountability, our economy. We don't actually get a say on, and that has been a deliberate policy. I mean, look, we talked about the World Health Organization, an agreement now, you know, basically not going to go to Parliament, that the World Health Organization will oversee pandemic planning for every country. No, thank you. I want it to be accountable because I want to be able to say when my country gets it wrong, which we will again, that we can hold them to account. I want more referendums. That's what I want. I want more referendums on specific issues so you can vote. You don't have to vote on a party line. That was the interesting thing about Brexit. It wasn't a party line vote, was it? You could actually vote on the specific issue for whatever your reasons were. I'd love to have a referendum on net zero, on immigration numbers, and
ECHR.
And let's actually debate those key issues. And again, you know, democracy is messy and expensive, but it's the best system we've come up with. By the way, a UK-based people smuggler, Ahmed Ebid, born in Egypt, has been sentenced to 25 years behind bars. He won't serve all of that for ruthlessly and cynically exploiting migrants as part of a £12 million illegal boat crossing operation. So that is one of the gangs smashed. Well done. There'll be another 40 turning up tomorrow to carry on the good work of the people smugglers. It's coming up to midday. I'd love to hear more from you on Brexit, on Lucy Connolly, on everything we are talking about. Lots more top guests, including the fabulous Lord Craig McKinley up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for joining me. Lots to talk about, and of course, I'd love to hear from you as well, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Always great to have your input as well. The number to call is 0344 499 1000. You can text on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. And certainly the calls are coming in thick and fast on two of our main topics today. One, of course, the Brexit betrayal, Starmer's surrender with that new EU reset in which Keir Starmer's basically once again just given away control of huge aspects of our lives, and we're going to pay for the benefit of doing it, as always, because goodness me, Keir Starmer has never ever found anything like spending money on more than giving it to Brussels bureaucrats to waste. But also Lucy Connolly, she of course is the childminder, wife of a former Tory councillor who was jailed for 31 months last summer after a tweet that she wrote, very nasty, very unpleasant tweet she wrote, basically, for which she ended up pleading guilty to inciting racial hatred. This was a tweet posted on the day of the Southport attack, in which 3 little girls were stabbed to death and 8 others also stabbed, 8 other children and 2 adults as well. Now, she had appealed last Thursday. The written judgment came out about an hour ago, and the court has basically refused her appeal. She is to keep her full 31-month sentence. However, we're speaking to the counsel at the Free Speech Union who've been helping her with her appeal, and they say she is going to be out in August under the early release scheme, but still behind bars for a whole year for a few words on Twitter. Does that seem reasonable to you? Also, a bit later in the show, going to be talking about Labour banning transgender women, let's call them what they are, trans-identified men, from all women shortlists for selection of the party candidates. I mean, that would make obvious, isn't it? Because actually you shouldn't have men on an all-women shortlist, although actually there shouldn't be all-women shortlists either. We're not a little minority that need our head patted and we're able to compete against the men. But we'll be talking about that in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling on the definition of what a woman is. That is all coming up. Plenty more besides. Joining me for the chat throughout the day has been Tom Slater, editor of Spite Online. Thank you once again for being with us. Just let's go back to Brexit first of all. I know lots of people are getting in touch about Lucy Connolly, but when it comes to Brexit, how big a betrayal do you think what Keir Starmer agreed to and announced yesterday is it? And will there be a penalty for that?
Well, I mean, the fundamental point of Brexit was control. It was the right of an independent nation to set its own laws, to elect its own governments that then can shape the nation in their own image. If we're signing up to dynamic alignment, which is the jargon word for basically just doing whatever the EU tells us to.
Was one of the key phrases to look out for, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah. on agri-food. When there was always these things are presented as if it always had to be this way. New Zealand's trade arrangements with the European Union is on the basis of mutual recognition. We've got similar standards, we're aiming for the same thing, but we don't need to follow the same rules because we are two separate entities.
But they're here more or less, yes.
Exactly. That could have been how these negotiations went. This was an obvious decision not to. And it's not just about what is in this particular deal, horrendous though much of it is, it's the direction of travel. You have said that on agri-food, so food and animal products and so on, that we are willing to basically just follow to what the EU rules are.
Even though our rules have been higher, have they not?
No, and also they're pretty broadly similar because in fact we didn't leave the European Union that long ago. And it's one of those things where then there's going to be a conversation, another big industry sector, trade group, whatever, is going to be like, well, why aren't we doing this in this particular area or this particular area or this particular area? That's the direction of travel. That's where Keir Starmer wants us to be, because really him and the section of politics that he represents would rather we never left to begin with. And you can see the argument starting to build of why these half measures, why these just small sector by sector deals when we could just cut out the middleman and rejoin. That's going to be the kind of discussions
and by the way, the people have actually written this as the tactic. We see you, Keir Starmer. We see you. We know what you're doing. Well, we'll talk more about that right now with Lord McKinley. Craig McKinley is a former Conservative MP, now Conservative peer, and joins us to discuss Brexit and indeed various other topics as well. A very good afternoon to you, Craig.
Good to see you, Julia.
Always
Very
good to be
see
joined.
you.
Thank you so much.
Actually, I must say, on a very sad day, because it's the day that we finally confirm that we pretty much lost the battle for Brexit. So this is a very serious day.
Oh, you are very pessimistic on that. For me, I just think this is a massive own goal by Keir Starmer, because he and all his mates, all his Europhile mates, they're absolutely convinced that anyone who voted for Brexit, we're all a bit bored with the Brexit battles. We're all conned by what was written on the side of a big red bus. We don't know what we're doing. A, we won't see it. We won't really notice it. They can slide us back in. And B, they'll get away with it. I think he's completely wrong. I think he's completely misread the nation. There's no trust in Keir Starmer. No one believes him. Everyone knows that he's not a Democrat. He tried to overturn Brexit 2016 to 2019. He couldn't do it. Couldn't do it openly. Now he's trying it by stealth. I don't think he's going to get away with it.
Well, he's now got the levers of power in his hand. Obviously, as Prime Minister, he tried 48 times while he was opposition European spokesman, and he was opposing Brexit all the way through those Brexit war days. So I'm not at all surprised. I mean, we're here on the night before. It all went to the wire, like it always does. There was, midnight talks and all the rest of it. I can tell you what was happening in those talks. They were trying to get Keir away from their side of the table because he was giving away just about everything they wanted.
Well, the fishing, they were going to do a 1-year rollover, then it became 4, and then somehow miraculously it became 12. But part of that is, if you do negotiation and before you finish the negotiation you set a date for the EU summit announcing the results of it, and it's going to be in London, and you're going to look like, frankly, a big tit if you haven't got anything to announce. That was what was going to happen. I'm referring to the bird, of course. Then they got you over a barrel, and he and the country were, let's be honest, shafted.
Well, I think Tom has got this absolutely right. This is little by little we'll accept the SPS rules, the same rules on agriculture, and then little by little there'll be another friction created by the EU because they can. They don't need to, but they can. And this type of government that they know is just a complete walkover will say, well, we better comply with another load of EU rules. Now, my red line on all these things is who adjudicates when there's a row. Now, under the TCA, there was a new adjudication body of which we had a judge effectively, and they had a judge, and there was a fair and even-handed adjudication. Now, what we've got back to with this new grand reset is the ECJ back in
European Court of
many
Justice,
areas.
yeah.
And if you are controlled by a foreign court, call me old-fashioned, but it means you have lost your sovereignty.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. And why on earth we always have to have our fishing fleet has to bear the brunt of all this?
Well, let's talk about this. We spoke to a staunch Remainer. I'd say Ramona. I don't mean it's an insult. It's just people who would fight against the actual result of the referendum in 2016. Say, look, fishing is this tiny part of our economy. It's not the future of our economy. Why is everyone getting such a tiz about it? What would you say to that?
Well, I would say this was an inheritance this country had, a unique inheritance. Certainly in my old patch of Ramsgate, it was a very proud industry that could be an awful lot bigger, that could be creating a lot of new jobs. But it always seems to be the thing that is given up because France asks for it. I know it's only £1 billion a year, but I tell you what, you keep adding $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and it becomes a decent increase in our economy. So it's not just fishing. It's not just complying with the new rules on agriculture. There is a rather dubious bill going through Parliament at the moment, very quietly. It's the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill, which will give ministers under Henry VIII powers the right to align all other products and how they're made and the safety of them exactly and completely with EU rules. So we don't need to have a new 1972 European Communities Act. This government have given itself the tools to actually ape the EU through the back door.
And that's the thing. And it's, as I say, it's what they always wanted to do. We've had some extraordinary criticism of Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. Being very clear that this is a surrender. Richard Tice says it's a huge betrayal. He's Deputy Leader of Reform. It's surrender on steroids, re-entering the EU in all but name by the back door. Kemi Badenoch has said we are being dragged back quietly, shamefully and deliberately. Starmer has reopened the old wounds of Brexit, not to heal them, but to surrender ground we'd already won. She says we will will reverse it. Some rather colourful language from Boris Johnson, the man who actually got Brexit done. It wasn't perfect. No one thought it would be. Let's face it, it was always going to be pretty tough after the outrageous negotiations on behalf of Theresa May and that betrayal there. By the way, Ollie Robbins, the man who did her negotiations, also the guy doing Keir Starmer's negotiations now, which tells you quite a lot. Boris Johnson, though, called Keir Starmer the orange ball chewing manacled gimp of Brussels, accused him of an appalling sellout which sacrificed UK fishing interests, and compared the deal with the surrenderism in the pact with Mauritius to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands and pay for the privilege of doing so. I mean, he's not wrong, is he?
No, he's completely right. He's completely right. Now, I'd hoped that I'd spent my quarter of a century getting Britain out of the European Union. I thought it was a job done, no matter how imperfectly, no matter how annoyed I was about how Northern Ireland had been left, and all of those things. I could sort of live with that. Yeah, job sort of done. So I'd moved on to fighting against the ridiculousness of net zero. And I'm looking forward to that battle over the years to come. But it looks like we're going to have to refight the battle for Brexit.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, because we're constantly told the Brexiteers, the ones who haven't moved on. No, we thought the job was done in 2016, then we had to fight for it again all the way through to the end of 2019, and then the deal. It's the Remainer, the Remainers. Nothing wrong with voting Remain, perfectly reasonable thing to do. Lots of people did democratic vote, but, no issue with that. But people who tried to stop it from happening and tried to undermine it and roll it back, they're different. They're different people. They're not Democrats. And Keir Starmer is the Remainer in chief. They're the ones who were.
What I can't understand, Julia, is you would have thought any political party gets a bit of advice from someone. I mean, this party, this Labour Party, is, unbelievable. It's every way it turns is wrong. I mean, if you've got any ounce of sense, you do not annoy millions of older people, pensioners in this country. They've managed to do that with the winter fuel allowance cut. You do not annoy the backbone of this country, i.e. farmers, and they've done that. They're now going to annoy, and not just annoy, they're going to completely frustrate those 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit because they wanted independence and sovereignty back. Their Newcastles, their red wall that actually voted very solidly for Brexit, they're already losing those votes heavily and hemorrhaging them. Who is advising the Labour Party? Because I think, if there's one good upside to this, I think the job was done before yesterday. But what this means is Keir Starmer has absolutely no chance of forming a government in 2020.
I have to say, I think he's going to rue this day. You mentioned net zero, but just briefly, very briefly, if you would, and you were part of, basically, let's look at the facts on this and fighting this insane policy that's going to completely ruin our economy even more than it's already ruined by net zero. This part of this EU deal is tying us into the EU carbon emissions sort of quotas and deals and scheme, and there will be a penalty for us if we dropped our net zero policies as a result of that. I mean, I use the word insane a lot about this field of our topic, but it really is the correct word, isn't it? That's insane.
Well, it is. Joining the Europeans' energy or the emissions trading system will add £112 a year to household energy bills. Already we're faced with the highest energy bills domestically of just about anywhere in the world. Do you know, there might be just one little good thing about this, and I never like to completely abrogate our own democracy and sovereignty. It might mean that Mad Miliband might be sidelined because we'll have a rather loopy Brussels telling us what to do instead. There's one little bit of brightness. It can't be more.
You
mad
say that. Everyone, again, I agree with you on Miliband. Everyone blames Miliband. It was Keir Starmer's policy, and he's the one who appointed him. He takes ultimate responsibility. I must ask also, and again, you among the many things you've been right on, by the way, you're a member of the COVID recovery group, trying to get sanity back, getting us out of lockdowns, getting things moving there. And again, a large part of our economic mess now is because of those policies that were put in place. The World Health Organization has agreed basically this deal where basically, they're going to be in charge of advising everyone on their pandemic policy in the future. They're going to sort of take that control. There's not going to be a vote in Parliament. This is the organisation which was completely wrong about everything to do with COVID, completely beholden to China, didn't think it came from a Wuhan lab, poo-pooed anyone with any advice on it, disinformation, blatant lies about vaccines, about masks, about lockdown and the right. But this government is signing up to this body, unelected, unaccountable body, to be in control of future pandemic policy and advise us. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, this government seems to love international policy making and international making bodies. It seems to worship them rather more than Parliament. I almost come back to what I said earlier on. If you have a foreign court in control, then you're not in control.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to move as a country thinking about the ECHR and certainly whatever the World Health Organization. Let's be honest, Julia, we made a complete enough mess of under our own steam of COVID. So the thought of some international body telling us what to do on any future pandemic fills me with dread. But have no fear. No parliament can be bound, or no future parliament can be bound by what is happening now. All this can and will be undone.
That is
because I think we have a crunch time coming and a new reset of the relationship between politicians and our public.
I absolutely expect that. Can I ask you about another big story in the news today? You'll know about just over an hour or so ago, we had the decision by the appeal court here in London on the case of Lucy Connolly. She is the childminder mother. She's a wife of a former Conservative councillor who posted a very nasty, unpleasant, horrible tweet on the day of the Southport attacks. She later deleted that tweet. A few days later, she was arrested. She was basically told you're not going to get bail. You're going to be on remand for many, many months. She pleaded guilty to the crime of inciting racial hatred. She was sentenced to 31 months. Last week, the appeal court basically heard her appeal. Today, we found out that they have dismissed her appeal for her sentence to be shortened. She is due, we understand, to be released on early release in August, but nevertheless has not been allowed out on any weekend visits, as other prisoners in her circumstance have done. What do you make of the decision to sentence her to 31 months and to not reduce her sentence on appeal?
Well, I'm really surprised. Last week when the appeal was being heard, I honestly thought she'd be released that day, frankly. That's what I hoped for her. I mean, yes, the words were graphic and they were hurty and all of that.
They were more, I mean, let's read them out. People don't know. She wrote, mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels full of the bees for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. She was talking about asylum seekers.
No, absolutely right. And, you know, they were words that shouldn't be used. Of course they shouldn't. But I tell you what really does do damage on the street when somebody is faced with a knife or they're being mugged or they've been sexually abused and attacked. And if they are charged and go through a court system, they'll find themselves with probably a lesser sentence than what this woman has had.
And that's if they're arrested.
That means that we have not got the right type of justice system. And if we keep going down this route, I'm afraid people will lose confidence in it. So I'm very disappointed for her. I think she has atoned sufficiently because let's not forget she actually deleted that tweet within hours when she had a little bit of a calm down. We were all rather not more than upset. I was distraught about what happened in Southport, as many people were in this country. What she exhibited was the human condition in perhaps an extreme way. But I would have thought the court would have said, yeah, you've calmed down, you've reflected, we realise that, and you've got a young family.
Is she a political prisoner?
I hate to think that we would be going down a route of politics and prisoners and all of that sort of thing. But when we talk about two-tier policing and justice, I'm afraid I have my doubts and fears. And it seems to me that if you're anti-woke on the wrong way or you've got a view that's wrong, I mean, I note even in this new employment rights bill, there is a potential protection for employees if they are wokey and right, you know, on the right side of things, but no protection if you are, for instance, concerned about climate as something of a skeptic.
That's wrong think. Wrong think,
so
indeed.
That is wrong think, and your group think is, I'm afraid, inhabiting everything we do. So, you know, wait for your P45, Julia, because you're on the wrong side.
I've been on the wrong side of every debate, apart from the fact I've always been proved to be on the right side of every debate, as indeed I think you have as well. Just finally, I want to ask you, in the last half an hour, we had a man who's Egyptian-born, Ahmed Ebid. He helped organise 3,800 migrants, basically on boat crossings from North Africa to Italy, some of them then making their way onto Britain. This according to the National Crime Agency. He's a UK-based people smuggler, helping them on that part of the journey. He has been jailed for 25 years, believed to be the first person convicted of organising boat crosses across the Med from the UK. He was sentenced to 25 years, having pleaded guilty to conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He was part of a £12 million illegal boat crossing operation. So he wasn't involved in getting people across the channel, but involved in people getting across the Med. Some of you ended up going across the channel lately. Now, we're told we're going to have the gangs smashed. I mean, is that the evidence that the gangs are being smashed?
Well, I must say 25-year sentence is very welcome. And I hope that that sort of goes across Facebook and all the rest of it so that others realise that the UK is not, you're going to get a stiff sentence. But, this is just a skin on the custard, isn't it, Julia? I mean, as you said earlier on, we're going to have many hundreds looking out the weather today. It's another long day. No doubt there will be many hundreds coming across the channel claiming to be poor refugees and all the rest of it. I'm afraid I don't believe half of them anymore. I don't blame them for coming here because they're coming for a new economic life. Yep. And I always question, these brave young men. They're always young men. They're that brave, leaving their countries they claim to be so dreadful, but they're leaving their mums, their sisters, their wives, and their young children.
Absolutely. You think they might want to stay and build their countries, wouldn't you?
Exactly right. Yeah, so I'm afraid, probably like the rest of us, we've become a little bit punch drunk by all this. I don't do Mr. Nice Guy on this anymore, and we need something rather more robust. And Yvette Cooper keeps saying we're going to smash the gangs.
Indeed. Craig McKinley. We'll have to leave it there. Lord McKinley, Conservative peer, thank you. Always so good to talk to you. Such a good friend of the show. Thank you very much, Dee. Tom Slater, your response on wherever you want to come in on there, really?
Well, it's just a reminder, isn't it? Just everything this government touches turns to the opposite of gold, really, doesn't it, to put it diplomatically? I mean,
it's a good thing this guy's being prosecuted. I think that's a good thing. Good credit.
No, absolutely. But it's a reminder of how big the problem still is. You think, we've got one, right, dozens left to go. Another one will pop up tomorrow.
But of course they will, because, you might get 25 years behind bars, but the odds of that, the reason why that's in the news doesn't happen very often.
No, absolutely.
Because the vast majority of those people who are involved don't go to prison, and what they do is they actually make money.
And we all know he's not going to smash the gangs. At the moment, he's just been smashing the records for illegal crossings. So it's everything that this government set itself to do is failing at. Meanwhile, all these unforced errors. Your biggest rival to be the next largest party in the next parliament is a party that literally used to be called the Brexit Party, and yet you're in the process of unravelling Brexit. This seems to me deranged.
Do you know, that's an interesting point, actually. Some people are pointing out, is there a possibility that Keir Starmer is actually doing sort of building up reform because he thinks he's got a chance of beating reform, but he's got a problem if the Tory party is strong?
I mean, to be honest, I think Keir Starmer shouldn't be, he's barely qualified to play kind of political noughts and crosses, let alone 3D chess. So I think you should stick to the fundamentals and see if he can possibly deliver on any of that, which he hasn't shown any strength.
Excellent. Right, love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch. Brexit, Lucy Connolly sentencing, you name it, get in touch. People smugglers. One of the gangs is smashed. Well, one of the guys in one of the gangs in one of the seas they're going across is smashed. So well done, everybody. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Lineker is going apparently because of this rat image, but it's not really the first time, and I think this is really reflects terribly on the BBC that it's taken this long. He's got this history of platforming anti-Semitic tropes. He's got this history of disproportionate hostility towards Israel compared to anywhere else in the world. He's been silent throughout on Jewish suffering, especially since October the 7th.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:27 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls and your messages. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's get some of those messages that have been coming in, text and tweets today about the Brexit betrayal. Francis says, which UK constituency was asking for a reset in the first place? This government appears to do deals to please the Cabinet and a few government officials and no one else. I mean, ain't that the truth? Seb says, Cameron regretted offering the referendum. This is true, and didn't believe people would vote to leave. There's been an illusion of independence for the UK, but in reality, the establishment is too weak to stand up and make the country a dynamic, forward-looking, independent state. It's exhausting. So true. The lack of belief in this country from the people in charge is terrifying. Brian says Starmer signs these things off, but it's a civil service blob that does most of the negotiations. They love Europe, so the deal was never going to benefit Britain. And Gary says this man has betrayed every principle he professed to stand for prior to the election. Did he pretend? Wait a minute, I must have missed that. When did Starmer pretend to have any principles? He betrayed his constituents, the voters and his party. He broke promise after promise, deceiving us all. And Nick says the Prime Minister is clearly not acting in the best interest of the UK and should be removed. Well, let's go to Andrew. He's in Hertfordshire. Andrew, you want to talk about Brexit betrayal, don't you?
Good morning, Julia.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. You made a very, very good point.
When did I do that? Let me write it down.
No, seriously, that Ollie Robbins has been in charge of the negotiation.
Yeah.
And people are, it's not their fault. The reason fishing is so important is after the Second World War, they pulled cod out of the waters around Great Britain the size of men. They were over 6 foot.
What?
It is yes. It is.
Can someone check that while we're on air? Google 6 foot cod.
And I can tell you why it's true, because the man that was involved in the negotiations, I used to play golf with, and he said when we went in 1970, the EU pushed everybody out the way and they just went to the fishing teams, and that's all they've ever wanted. So fishing isn't so
well, fishing is a huge industry in France and in Spain, and they care very strongly about it, and so that's one of the reasons why it's become such a big deal, isn't it? But let's go back. Do you think it's significant about Ollie Robbins? Why?
Because he was the person that negotiated for May and was so poor then. And the reason was we have something they want, which is the fishing, and we've given it away. If it has no value, why do they want it so much?
Thank you.
And if you look at it in the round, there was only ever Conservative and Labour. This is just a massive line in the manifesto for reform. They can't fail. And it's the end of the Labour Party. It really genuinely is.
Well, we certainly know Keir Starmer went to the parliamentary, to all the Labour MPs. I don't know how they all got in one room, a committee room in the Commons yesterday. There's so many of them. But apparently there were, I think it was 20-odd questions to him, and not one of them was positive. And you think, given that these are all Ramonas to a man and a woman, I'm pretty much surprised by that. Andrew, thank you for that. Has someone found out about 6 foot cod yet? Were there 6 foot cod? There's one record of 6 foot cod. But he plays golf. He played golf with the guy who said there were, so that's it. That's more than enough. Do you know what? This could be BBC Verify, because that's as much research as they do before they verify something.
Quick Google, yeah.
Quick Google, there you go. Someone on Wikipedia, bloke Andrew plays golf with said this, but there we are. Anyway, Mark is on the line. He's in Lincolnshire. Mark, do you have any tales of very large fish for us?
Unfortunately not, Julia.
Well, I mean, all right, next caller.
I'll I'll say my usual to you first anyway, Julia. Good morning, me duck. Well, good afternoon, me duck, actually.
Oh, I got my duck. I got my duck, I'm happy. No fish, but I've got my duck.
I've caught a few decent-sized perch in the past, but, not so much cod. Anyway...
What's happened? What's gone?
Well, it's a fishy story today.
Oh, come on.
The fishy government at that, that's for sure.
What do you make of Brexit? Is it this Brexit deal, post-Brexit deal, is it betrayal or not?
Of course it is. I mean, it's an absolute betrayal. But, it kind of leads me to an increasing feeling that I've had for a while, that I'm starting to think that we just can't vote our way out of this anymore, Julia. I'm starting to come to, like I say, the conclusion that this whole thing is just nothing but a charade. It really is. If you rewind a few hundred years, we used to square off on battlefields and basically slaughter each other, and the victors would instill their ideology on the nation.
Yeah.
That's how things used to be done. We stopped doing that under the pretense that we would vote for these politicians who would enact our will, and whoever got the most votes would be the one in power. But in 4 years, 5 years, you'd have your chance to replace them.
Yeah,
that was the whole idea of this, wasn't it?
Yeah. And you think it's all just an illusion and a charade now? Because that's interesting. Because Dave called up earlier and he said the same thing. He said we're not a democracy anymore. They just do what they want.
Exactly. It's not just this government. This has been going on for decades.
Yeah.
They promise you the earth. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to do the other. And the one thing that is relatively new over the last probably 10 years or so is they quite literally do the direct opposite of what they're offering. It's like Starmer when he's talking about change. No, he never said pre-election. He kept banging on about change, and he still is now. He's never really once defined what that change actually is.
No.
So.
Not change the better. Well, it's like one of the commentators yesterday talking about, when they said they were going to stop the boats, we didn't think we meant it was the fishing boats,
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I've said to Kev, I had a quick chat with Kev last night.
You dirty two-timer.
I kind of half it, sorry?
You dirty two-timer.
I know, I can't help myself, Julia. It's the way he's that glint in his eye, Anyway, Maria on the evening, by the way, that's my name. Anyhow,
I just no idea what's happening. Anyway, as you said to Kevin, then I've got to move on.
As I said to him, I kind of half expect to start finding Frenchmen at our rivers, fishing those rivers.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
no, totally. I'm with you, Mark. Such a great call. Thank you very much indeed. Tom, I mean, this is the thing. It's amazing how many people just say, look, they just don't believe in democracy anymore. One of the things I was most proudest of about Brexit is from 2016, the people voted. And we were told by every single great and the good organisation, we were mad to vote for Brexit. We went, sod off, we'll do what we're sodding well want to. They didn't believe any of the, and they were lies. Mark Carney, banking governor, leading all these lies about how poor the country would be. I mean, again, all these other countries are doing badly, but they haven't Brexited, and yet it must be down to Brexit. Again, small matter of lockdown, Ukraine war, and energy prices net zero may have more to do with it all.
Maybe just
But when the most outrageous provocation, as we were being sold down the river by Theresa May, we had cabinet resignations, and then we had this, outrageous behaviour by the Speaker then, John Burkett. Remember those years? 2019 was extraordinary. I remember doing the show, from College Green on days when they were just trying desperately to stop a democratic vote being enacted. It was absolutely outrageous. And not once do Brexiteers go on the streets and riot and storm Parliament or anything. I mean, my God, I was at the point where I was going to get my pitchfork ready just in case, because there does come a point when someone undermines democracy so much that, that calls for a different level of action. But we waited for that vote. We waited for another chance, and people voted when they got a chance to get Brexit done, and people waited and got their vote. The patience and the goodwill of the British people has been totally and utterly undervalued in recent years. But I think people are losing more and more faith in democracy, and I think that's a very, very dangerous thing.
No, absolutely. But I think it's worth remembering just how much we did achieve through that. The Tories didn't want to give us a referendum. They had to give it to us in the end. They didn't want us to win. That was
because of Nigel Farage.
No, absolutely. But, it's because people going out to vote, they didn't want our side to win that referendum. We did win it. They wanted to soften it up, to scupper it. They weren't allowed to get away with that. And I think now, of course, we've got Keir Starmer, and he was always going to want to unpick this. But even he has had to at least pretend that he's not doing so.
Yeah.
And there's more elections to come. There's more opportunities to land those blows against the establishment. And I dare say, particularly on the evidence of the past couple of days, people are going to be more inspired than before to take a stand in those
Absolutely, absolutely. Tom Slade, thank you very much indeed. 12:36 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about Labour banning trans women, i.e. men, from all women shortlist. Oh, finally a bit of sense in the Labour Party. Well, apart from the all women shortlist. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:39 is the time. Let's talk about two more stories involving, well, it's always about trans women, isn't it? OK, let's call them what they are, trans-identified men. And the Labour Party has decided to ban men from all women shortlists when they select their candidates to run in seats. Well, I'd say winnable seats. Not entirely sure there are going to be many of those. This would comply with Supreme Court judgment. However, the Houses of Parliament are refusing to ban trans-identified men, which they call trans women, from female loos. Again, completely up against the Supreme Court ruling, making it really clear if you've got a single-sex space for women, it has to be only for women. Well, let's talk about this with Emma Hartley, no relation, campaigner at the Women's Rights Network, who joins us now. Hello, Emma.
Hi. Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about the Labour Party first of all. I don't actually approve of women-only shortlists anyway. I've always thought they're rather demeaning to women. But I'm quite fascinated that the Labour Party has clearly got some good legal advice at long last, and their ruling body is expected to vote today on measures to scrap rules that allowed positive action schemes to be operated on the basis of self-identification. This is just meaningless twaddle for meaning a bloke who pretends or thinks he's a woman can go on an all-women shortlist. That's not going to happen anymore. Do you welcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really interesting that it's clearly the lawyers that have forced them to change their policy.
Yeah. Well, now they're not inclusive anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, it just shows that their policy's not been lawful from the beginning, which loads of women's rights campaigners have said, you know, that's not right. You're including a man in an only women shortlist. I mean, I agree with you in terms of I'm not sure what the benefits of only women shortlists are, but
if you're going to have them, they should only be for women.
Absolutely, yeah. So this way. It's very much.
Well, it is interesting. The wake of that your Supreme Court decision, there was a view that, well, job done. It's amazing how many organisations have gone, oh, no, I think I'm not sure we're going to go along with that. Even the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which very, very quickly after that said, look, here's the guidance, everybody. There's no change in the law. This is what the law has always been. This clarifies the law. It's not someone thinking they're a woman or a man. It's not someone who's got a gender recognition certificate. Doesn't matter. It's biological sex. That's it. Full stop. Nothing to discuss. And then they've had an outcry within the body. We weren't consulted. Well, no, I don't see why you should be consulted, you lanyard-wearing class. You're not a lawyer. You're not a Supreme Court judge. You don't get to have a consultation. But they are now having a consultation. It's going to take some weeks and months before they give a ruling on this. So it is interesting that a lot of organisations like Labour, of all bodies who've pushed this agenda for the last 10 plus years, that they have decided to basically backtrack on this so quickly.
But they're backtracking on it in a way that is sort of saying, oh, now there's clarity, now we have to change what we're doing, rather than actually, apologising to all the people that this has affected. And yet there's still so much outcry within their own party. I mean, I think it's completely staggering that they're proposing, just postponing the women's conference in general. That just highlights how really it feeds this narrative of Labour being a boys' club. They don't really care about women, because if that's the solution, because they want to avoid political embarrassment. No, the way you avoid political embarrassment is by being straight with the public about how you've been wrong on this, and actually, speaking to members of your own party and going, yeah, this is the law, and actually we're in government. If you don't like that this is the law, we can change the law. But they're not doing that. They're just actually saying we're not even going to follow the law.
And that's a fascinating thing, because I was amazed when apparently, Keir Starmer saying, he accepted Supreme Court judgment. So one day he thought that trans women were women, i.e. men were women and could become women. And the next day he didn't think that anymore, because a few judges, the Supreme Court told him that. Now, if that Supreme Court judgment in April had gone against the For Women Scotland campaigners, and they said, no, anyone can identify as being a woman and that's fine, that's what being a woman means, I wouldn't have changed my view. I'd have known that decision was wrong. I mean, it's not because the Supreme Court have said it that it's right, it's because that sort of clarifies the law. But it is a simple matter of fact that men aren't women and can't become women. I don't know why anyone struggles with this personally.
Well, absolutely, and I'm actually it makes me so grateful that actually the Supreme Court did make the decision, and trans groups were consulted. You had the Scottish Government and Amnesty arguing for trans groups, so it's just complete rubbish that they've never been consulted at all.
I don't care whether they were or they weren't.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, genuinely, this is a ruling about definition of woman, so why would you need to discuss that with trans people? It's irrelevant. But let's talk about the House of Parliament, though, because this is extraordinary. The House of Parliament have refused to ban trans women, i.e. men, from women's loos, despite the ruling. Spokesman said they were waiting for guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and we know that's going to be a little while. They said they want to ensure that all people are treated in an inclusive manner. House of Lords adopting a similar approach. But, the Houses of Parliament aren't above the law any more than anyone else is. The interim guidance is clear that basically anywhere where you have got single-sex facilities, then biological men should not be permitted to use those facilities. That is the guidance. But we've said, they've seen the NHS and others saying they're going to await this guidance, but they didn't trust the guidance before others. I mean, we've got some sports that have acted on it, as other sports haven't. I don't understand why so many organisations think they can flout this, and what's the answer to it? Is it just that women just go to court and challenge every single one of these organisations?
Well, I think that it's really sad that I think that that's what we've got to do. I mean, when they talk about compassion and dignity and respect, it's always compassion and dignity for the men. What about the women? The women in our, in the workplace and Parliament that don't feel comfortable accessing the toilets, which are shared, with the cubicles. What about the compassion for them? For the women that go to the workplace and may have suffered violence and abuse at home?
Well, they're just, Emma, they're just transphobic bigots. Didn't you know that?
No. Yeah, absolutely. It's just madness. And, where's the consultation of them? Women just aren't allowed a voice in this, or if they say something, told to shut up because, as you say, we're transphobic bigots and Nazis and all sorts of other rhetoric, which is just really ridiculous and quite unfair, to be honest. So.
Yeah, exactly. It is just unfair. It is that simple. Emma Hartley, well, I'm going to have to make you shut up because I've got to move on. But she's a campaigner at the Women's Rights Network. Thank you so much for joining us. Tom Slater, I mean, again, do we just need to have court case after court case? But my thing is, even with that, whether it's powers of the Parliament, whether it's the NHS, whether it's any other organisation, any political party carrying on with this madness, none of them really believe in it. I mean, if you do believe it, you're mad anyway. I'm sorry, I've always said this. But the thing is, even if you go to a court case and Free Speech Union and Sex Matters are helping to fund these things, it still costs money, it costs time and energy. But no one ever pays a penalty. Shouldn't there be a simple edict like right now? If you are running a body or you're responsible for this and you don't change the rules on this and access to toilets and changing rooms, things, by the end of this week, you will be held personally liable for all of the court costs and you will lose. And you will lose your job. Let's just get down to brass tacks.
We may well need something like that. I mean, I'm hopeful that the first couple of cases will sort of send the signal out, because I think a lot of these institutions don't really care. They're just doing it because they're running scared of the activists and maybe make them run scared of litigation. Maybe that's the way to sort this out. But it is going to be a tricky thing to dislodge, and it shouldn't fall down to if it's a particular company or a particular service or whatever it might be. It shouldn't be a kind of lottery where you need one person within that institution who bravely stands up to it, gets in touch with the right people, crowdfunds. It shouldn't require that for women to have their rights in all these different places, but unfortunately that's what we're left with even after that Supreme Court.
It is that simple, isn't it? Just to let you know, the Prime Minister is facing a grilling in the House of Commons over his Brexit reset deal with the European Union. He's delivered a statement, delivering, but he's getting lots of other interim questions on the terms of the deal and answering questions. He said the pact will enable the UK to seize the opportunities of the future. Sorry. The pact will enable the UK to seize the opportunities of the future. An opposition MP could then be heard shouting, "Tell that to the fishermen." So I don't think it's going down that well. 12:48 is the time. We're going to take a break. Then we're going to be talking to former police officer Mike Neville about that decision by the court. We had announced just under 2 hours ago that Lucy Connolly has lost her appeal to reduce her 31-month sentence for writing a tweet. This is Talk.
What do they mean by black? I mean, do they mean just dark-skinned people? The Beaker people were dark-skinned. They're genetically close to the people from Sardinia. But they were all blue-eyed and they had swarthy skin like a Mediterranean. And those were the people that we believe built Stonehenge. But there's a world of difference between somebody from Spain or Portugal and somebody from sub-Saharan African.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. I'm still here, Julia Hartley-Brewer. So is Tom Slater. And Ian Collins is going to be here in just a couple of moments as well. Tell us what's happening on his show. Keir Starmer is taking questions, giving a statement. We've had a statement, actually, I think now just begun from Kemi Badenoch, criticising his Brexit reset deal. Not going too well, is it, Keir? Funny that. Also, what didn't go well today was Lucy Connolly's appeal against her 31-month sentence for a very nasty tweet that she wrote in the wake of the Southport attacks, indeed, on the day. Deleted 3.5 hours later, but she got sentenced to 31 months after she pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred. She appealed last Thursday. The court gave their judgment at about 11 o'clock today in a written statement that she was not going to have her sentence reduced. However, she is likely to be out on early release in August, but nevertheless a year behind bars for, well, hurty words. Is that reasonable? Let's talk to Mike Neville. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective, Chief Inspector, and joins us once again. Good afternoon to you, Mike.
Good afternoon, Julia, from Spain.
Oh, from Spain. Like, how did you cope with your e-gates? Did they work under this new Brexit reset?
No, they didn't. We had to show our passports and get stamps.
There we are. We're still having to do that, aren't we? I'm really worried. Given all the travelling I do, I'm going to go through passports pretty quickly on that basis. But anyway, let's talk about Lucy Connolly, because she ain't going anywhere, certainly until August. What did you make of, first of all, the original sentence and the fact that the appeal court has decided that she shouldn't have it reduced, even though some people who took part in the actual riots post-Southport got lower sentences?
Well, I think, Julia, we look at the purpose of prison. The purpose of prison really is to keep us safe. And what threat is she? So if we look, for example, we're told there's a limited number of places and it's 99% full. So they're already releasing burglars, drug dealers, violent men. If you look at people who carry knives, let's look at people who carry knives. Less than 30% of people who carry a knife go to prison, and they go to prison for 6 or 7 months on average. And also what you have is this issue of the two-tier system where are your beliefs one way or the other? So for example, there's a case, Sarah Jane Baker. She was the trans activist who shouted into a microphone, punch an effing turf. Yeah. She was found not guilty of incitement on that.
But that was these were direct words, okay? Found not guilty by a court of law, but to a crowd, telling people openly, inciting them to violence.
Oh, that's right. We have the Kent councillor at the same.
Without naming any names, there is a case that is still going to court.
Allegedly.
It's subject. Okay, just in case. Allegedly. Okay, there's just.
And then we have the three women who were found guilty of supporting terrorism, who had the hang gliding stickers on their backs during the Palestinian marches. Yeah. They received a 12-month conditional discharge. That means nothing. You walk out of court on the day. So what it tells people is that if you support one side of the political debate, it would seem that you get treated differently from the other, because Lucy Connolly is no risk to me, you, or anybody else. She said vile and nasty words on the thing. She should have been cautioned for that. She's a woman with no previous conviction.
And you think that there should have been some action over the tweet? I mean, again, just to remind everyone what she said, because I do think it's important when we're discussing this, we know what she said. Mass deportation now, this was within hours of the Southport attack. We knew that little girls had died, and this is when the rumours were still going on that it was an asylum seeker. That was completely false. Mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels full of the bees, for all I care. She used the actual words. If that makes me racist, so be it. She then deleted that tweet later, just within 3.5 hours. There were lots of other mitigating factors. She herself had lost a child to illness years earlier. You think that there should have been some sort of police action about that?
Police go around and say this is completely unacceptable and remove it or whatever. But it is something which could have been dealt with in a much better way and freeing up a prison place. The other really strange thing about all this, Julie, is when at the time, Keir Starmer, a man who keeps telling us about his being a lawyer and the Director of Public Prosecutions, he made a big deal about I can't say anything about Axel Ruder-Cabana. I can't say anything about his motives, the fact that he knew within hours he had rice in an Al-Qaeda handbook. I can't say anything about that. It would have impacted on the court. And yet he felt nothing about saying all these right-wing thugs who are whipping up things online. And we now know that was completely false. The people who were found guilty of the rioting and the like often travelled less than a mile to go to do their stupid.
And most of them already had, they were already had a string of offences for violence and disorder already. Yeah. And again, this is the HM Inspector of Constabulary finding that actually there weren't ideological motives. If we see, as we've seen, it's like the 2011 riots, mostly in London. It was just people out for a good ruck, basically, and a bit of shoplifting.
Absolutely, and it's a free go. You can have a go at the authorities. You can have a go with your mates. It's like being involved in some kind of football hooliganism. All completely stupid, completely wicked, attacking police officers who don't deserve to be attacked. But no central organisation as that was alleged. But I just think all the time, Julie, you know, people used to trust the police in this country. They used to trust the courts. Our justice system, our policing was seen as some of the best in the world. And we're told by the top all the time, oh, it's not two-tier. Yeah. And it's just like 1984. You can't believe the evidence of your own eyes.
That's the thing. Just finally, very briefly, if you would, we also learned today that Tommy Robinson, a.k.a. Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, he was jailed in October after admitting multiple breaches of an injunction. Basically, it was contempt of court. This is over a libelous video he's kept putting out about a Syrian refugee. And he's basically going to be released from his 18-month sentence for the civil offence of contempt of court. It was reduced by 4 months at the High Court today, so he's going to be due to released in the next week. What do you make of that decision?
What I'll say is that prison is, if we've got limited places, we need to put violent men in jail. We need to put knife carriers, people who carry guns, burglars, drug dealers and robbers into prison. And if we've got any space left, then we can think about other things. Okay. But let's use the prisons to keep us safe. OK.
Mike Neville, so appreciate joining us, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector Tom Slater. Going back to Lucy Connolly, again, lots of people feel like, look, something should be taken, a police caution. We can't have people tweeting, insightful things, but it is... 31 months is clearly absurd.
No, absolutely. And I think regardless of the ins and outs of this case, the harshness of the punishment is what people are objecting to more than anything else. That's what this appeal...
No one's saying what she wrote was OK.
No, absolutely. And that's what this appeal was fundamentally about. And when you contrast it with people getting lesser sentences for actually engaging in the rioting that she was supposedly inciting, it's quite clear that this was a judgment that
and as Mike Neville says, it actually completely depends what side of the political divide you get on. Indeed, some of the people who did write tweets which could have actually incited violence about, there's been an acid attack on a Muslim woman, when there wasn't, never taking it down, never apologising, no police, and clearly disinformation, no police action on that at all. Not that I think there should be, but it's got to be the same rules for everybody, isn't it? Talking about the same rules for everyone, Ian Collins is here.
Yeah.
Same rules, going to be in the hot seat in a moment. What do you make of the Lucy Connolly decision?
Well, we talked about it last week. I mean, I think it's unbelievable that you would get 31 months for this, and you just really said it. I mean, it's the length of the sentence. I don't think anybody... I'd extend that, by the way, to the Just Stop Oil bloke who got 5 years, for God's sake. Again, what use does that serve to the public? Whether they're left or right, and that's why